Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Frontiers 2025, the third year where we're hosting our open source conference for application and infrastructure developers. Usually, the conference would be focused only on crypto stuff, but this year we also have some AI dev tools that will help us build the future of crypto together. Before I get deeper into things, some logistics, we have the live stream on the website. Send it to your friends, to your parents, to everyone, to your colleagues. We want people to see what's about to be presented today and tomorrow. I think it's going to be an awesome schedule that we put a lot of effort into. The Wi-Fi is there, and I'm not wearing it right now, but you will see Paradigm and Ithaca Falls with the green lanyards, which you can ask anything about investments, open source, technical stuff, Reth, Foundry, Porto, Revum, Alloy, WAGMI, VM, all of the tools that we've built over the years that people in this room are using. We have a Telegram chat where you can feel free to ask any question. We're hosting this hackathon later in the day where we hope that people can get in and ask questions about, hey, I want to build with someone, or hey, what's a good idea to build, or hey, I want some advice on something. We will be watching that, and we'll be there to assist. So, well, firstly, how many people were in the Rust Ethereum Day in 2023? My guess is some, not a lot. So the idea came from the fact that we were building in Rust, in Ethereum. So we said, OK, why don't we host a Rust Ethereum Day? That happened 2 years ago in the Foundry, which was a happy naming collision with our developer tool, Foundry. And it was a good success. We put it together in about a month, maybe 5 weeks. We got about 100 developers. It was a nice, cozy, intimate meetup, and we're very happy with the result. That lasted 1 day, that time, and it was mostly talks from us and our very close friends. The next year, we hosted it again at the Foundry, but we renamed it a bit to be able to cover our full ambition of the event, which is that we're building at the frontier. Let's call the event Frontiers because we're trying to push to new frontiers. So the theme of Frontiers is really one that I was really looking for a better conference, a conference for engineers, by engineers, a conference meant to bring together the community that we have built together over the last few years. And we've been doing open source for about 5 years now at Paradigm and with the rest of our friends. And the last 2-3 years, I would say, we have some great wins where Foundry is now one of the most used open source tools. Reth is starting to gain adoption in the staking and the layer 2 world. And now we're trying to take it to the next level. And again, the essence of Frontiers is engineering. We don't really want booths, marketing, or repeat talks. So every talk that you will see today and tomorrow is an original talk where we push the speakers very hard on to try to come up with something original that hasn't been presented before. And the content is not either for beginners. It's for people that are willing to go the extra mile, to push the frontier, and they're willing, ultimately, to sink their teeth deep into the topic that we're presenting and deeply understand it. So each year, we do a tight selection process. We filter for developers that have used our open source tools or want to use our open source tools, and we create a very intense program aimed at up-leveling them and helping them meet other extremely talented developers. So it's a conference built by the community for the community. Now, for Frontiers 2025, we combined it with the fact that many people are already in San Francisco because there were other events happening. So we said, OK, what if we book a slightly bigger venue, the Midway, where the Midway is typically used for nighttime activities, usually for electronic music shows. This time we thought, OK, what if we turned it into a conference venue? And I think this is the right venue for the ambition of the event that we're trying to achieve. We had about 650 people RSVP. I know that our engineers are a bit hard to get up at 8 or 9 a.m. So throughout the day, we're going to have more and more people coming in. And basically, everybody here is an engineer, with the exception of some people that should be engineers. And it's going to be 3 days of open source software, Rust, crypto applications. We're going to have 2 AI talks, developer tools, and on the end of the second day, we'll also have 3 consensus talks, which are going to tell us about the frontier in performance of distributed systems. The expectation is that I would really ask the audience to try to treat this like a university classroom. We're trying to be fully focused, try to avoid tweeting, don't email, don't respond to Telegram, just pay attention to the talks because we put a lot of effort in it, and we'd love that you also put the effort back in to us. Networking in the breaks, there will be plenty of time to talk with everyone. Everybody's available. And nobody's chasing us. We have the whole day. We have the whole day tomorrow. And we can have a good time together. And today, at 1 p.m., when the talks wrap and the lunch is over, we'll do a small hackathon. So normally, hackathons are 2-3 days, or sometimes you see online hackathons last a whole month. This time, and I think what inspired me for this was a hackathon that Vercel and NVIDIA or some other people have done a few months ago, which was a 2-hour hackathon, where they're like, OK, we have AI tools, go and build crazy stuff in 2 hours. So OK, we thought, OK, maybe since we have the whole day, let's do it a little bigger. So we talked to Vercel and Anthropic, and they were so graceful that they will give us access to V0, which is an awesome tool that Guillermo will talk to us after me, which basically lets you go from text to UI, and Claude Code, which is a tool that we've been using to basically give a prompt and start doing a lot of back-end or front-end work. And fun fact, most of the Frontiers website, it was built with many of these tools. So big shout out to them. At the end of the hackathon, there won't be a formal judging process. The thing that I wrote in the chat room is that we want people to work hard and do something cool. I don't really care for a fantastic presentation or something that comes up super polished. What I really care about is that you try to go deep into what you're doing. And at the end of the event, whoever has done the most proof of work, we will raffle out some of these awesome keyboards branded for Frontiers, limited edition just for this year, to a few people that we think really passed the bar for the proof of work. And the judging criteria is all going to be vibes-based, and that's OK. Trust that our vibe check is going to be good. OK, so without any further ado, crypto is technology that enables financial freedom. I started working in crypto 8 years ago because it showed me what you can do just with a few lines of code. With a few lines of Solidity or some Bitcoin script, you could move millions or billions of dollars at the speed of light with a very, very tiny fee. Nobody can take away your crypto money. It's purely yours, and you know that it can last for the long run. The other thing that's awesome about crypto is that it's transparent and verifiable. What does this concretely mean? It means that if you have the global financial system running on crypto, in 2008, you didn't have a health meter that said, hey, here's how healthy the financial system is. You might want to take a better look at it. Whereas in crypto, when MakerDAO, for the ones that remember, was going haywire, we had a live meter that said, hey, something is happening, go fix it. And that's the essence of crypto. Not only is it self-custodial money that you can truly own for the long run, but it's a system that gives you credible commitments for the long run that you can observe in real time and be confident that what you're doing is going to be working as expected. Now, there's some nice side effects of all of that, transparency and long-term and open sourceness, which is that every API in crypto is by nature open and composable, which is it lets you do some fun things. For example, if I have a exchange and a lending market, I can combine these two, and I can create a levered product, which is not something that you can do without asking for somebody's permission in traditional finance. Usually, you need to go get an API key, get 10 licenses, check with your legal department. It will take maybe a few years. Whereas in crypto, I can literally take a 15-year-old developer, tell them, this is the API, this is the other API, put them together, and now you have something awesome. And that's something uniquely net new, and it's something that truly excites developers for crypto. Tomasz yesterday was saying that Ethereum is the world computer. The world computer is the eternal nerd snipe. Why? Because you can just keep combining things and building new cool things that you didn't think about before. And the final thing that makes me really excited about crypto is that all of this fairness, all of this open source, transparency, and ultimately a value system that's based on creating fair markets without gatekeepers, without rent seeking. You will see that people always say, hey, you cannot charge this much because somebody will fork you and then they will try to undercut you. So the competitive nature in crypto is really high because of some of these open source and like public composability dynamics, but also this downstream effect is you have fairness, a more level playing field, which ultimately benefits the consumer. And that's what we're doing. We're building technology that makes consumers feel safer and more comfortable and more benefited by the technology. And if there's one takeaway that I've had from the last couple of years, and I want the rest of the audience to have, is that it has never been easier to build an app with money inside. And it doesn't need to be a crypto finance app. It doesn't need to be your degenerate application. It doesn't need to be like an exchange. It doesn't need to be a token launchpad. It can be a simple, hey, I'm selling some merch, add money into it. And hey, by the way, if you're storing money in my app, why don't I also give you 3% on that money in the app? And while I'm doing that, why don't you also bet on how many T-shirts I'm going to sell in the next month? And I think this is increasingly happening. So for example, ticketing companies, they want to start upselling their users into, hey, which song is my favorite artist going to play at the end? And this is all basically part of a larger trend that I believe that every app is starting to look like a fintech app, where usually to build a fintech app, it would require, again, tons of work. You need to get licensed everywhere, et cetera. Whereas in crypto, you just import crypto. You import a few libraries in your code, you tap into a global financial system, and suddenly your app has money inside. But this trend, these are all nice things, but this trend is what am I talking about? We're not there yet. So the crypto apps and the crypto mission, fundamentally, have been set behind by two big things, which is A, cost, which I think we've made great strides in over the last few years, where it is with high-performance L1s, whether it's with L2 technologies, with more high-performance off-chain infrastructure, and UX, which UX has been a more tough conversation, is kind of the theme of this talk. And ultimately, the only people that would get over this big barrier to entry were the big speculators. Because if I tell you, hey, you're going to make 100x or 10x on whatever money you're going to put in, that's fine. Cost is no problem. UX, I'm going to go through death by 1,000 cuts if that means I can reach the El Dorado. So cost and UX select what apps can use crypto. And so you can imagine a curve that starts with initially when the cost and the UX is very bad, it's just speculative activity. Then as it gets down, you get maybe into more consumer yield earning savings products that only make sense past a certain amount, where you don't frequently interact with the thing. And then as that cost and UX curve becomes easier to navigate, then you get into consumer applications, day-to-day usage, real-time betting, ticketing on-chain, DNA, all of the crazy use cases that you've heard about the years. Cost and UX have been the biggest barrier to get to them. So I'm just going to tell a little story about the last 10 years of crypto UX, which I think some of you will relate to. So you go to some app, call it, there was an app back in the day called EtherDelta, which was a fun exchange. It let you trade all sorts of things that you wouldn't trade if you had the knowledge that you have now. But you went to it because there was nothing else to do. So what does the experience look like? You go to the website. The website takes a few seconds to load. Then you click Connect Wallet. It shows you MetaMask. You're like, OK, what the hell is MetaMask? It tells you, hey, go download MetaMask. You open a new tab. If you're lucky that you're on a browser that supports browser extensions, because if you're using Safari, there's no browser extensions for Safari that would work with MetaMask back in the day. You install MetaMask. Then MetaMask tells you, and this applies also to MetaMask, like all other wallets that are using MetaMask, because that's the wallet that everybody uses when they're talking about bad UX. No hate. So you go to MetaMask or unnamed wallet, and it tells you, hey, write down these 12 words, where the 12 words, they're like a bunch of stuff that you would think, what am I doing here? So you take these 12 words, you maybe write them down. Most people wouldn't write them down. Then you click next, and it tells you what was the first, fifth, and eighth word in these things. And you're losing it. You're like, OK, what the hell am I doing here? OK, that's, my mom doesn't know what a Chrome extension is. But let's say I got here over the line to do that. The moment that 138 moment comes, talk to me next year. OK, some people get through that. They install their wallet. Then they see something that says, hey, you have $0. How do you deposit the dollars? And again, back in the day, we didn't have on-ramps baked into the wallets. But even today, where we have the on-ramps baked into the wallets, there's still some things that happen. So who here hates their on-ramp? I know I do. I think most people would. And why is that? There's like two things. One, when you click buy, it asks you to input your name, your surname, your address, a selfie, your passport, your dog's name, where you grew up, like tons of things that, A, I don't remember half of them, and two, by the time you've done them, you've kind of lost interest. So that onboarding step where you need to on-ramp from fiat to crypto is one of the biggest issues with crypto UX these days. And that's, if there was one problem that I would invite everyone to push, is that go talk to whoever your on-ramp is and push them to using something that does KYC-less on-ramp up to a certain amount, call it $100, $200, $500, lifetime. No need for the user to keep onboarding, just one time, because when the user comes in, they're going to be able to Apple Pay their way in. OK, so on-ramp problem solved. You guys are going to push your on-ramp providers to get it done. Fantastic, solved. So now I got dollars in my account. And because I'm a normie, or I'm just a normal user, honestly, I don't want to hold a volatile asset. I onboarded to some stablecoin. Now I click buy on either Delta or on Uniswap or anything else, and then it tells me gas. What's gas? Is this a car? I thought I went to an exchange. Right? And so gas, what the hell is gas? And then it tells you, oh, gas is transaction fees that you need to pay for. OK, you lost me. So there's all of this stuff that you start encountering. So then you have gas. Then you see, oh, you need to approve and then swap. Then after doing all of that, then you need to figure out off-ramping. Oh, I need to KYC to a higher tier. Oh, my bank blocked me. Nobody will use crypto if all of these problems are in the hot path of the user. That's why we have a ton of activation energy required to get anything done in crypto. And that's why I suspect that most people have been retreating in their safe zone of doing infrastructure instead of trying to go after these really hard problems. But I think these years we can do a lot better. And this has been powered by a lot of recent advancements that I will talk about in a second. But I think finally we're in the time where the stack is ready. The on-ramps have gotten good enough, maybe. MetaMask doesn't prompt you to do 12 words in the beginning. It just shows you a red. Your account is insecure at the very end. But you see that at the end, so it's OK. People have figured out how to do fee abstraction, which means that you kind of don't need to pay gas in the native token of the chain. You just do some stablecoin, and then the backend figures out how to pay. Maybe the batching problem is also some things are looking better. Privy and others have done great embedded wallet experience where you just click sign in with Google, and then OK, you're in the app. You don't get kicked out. The weird pop-ups all of the time. So it looks like things are looking better. So I'm just going to walk through what I believe to be the 3 table stakes requirements for crypto apps, and what have we done to help advance this. And then I'm going to get into some best practices and some things to avoid. So the first thing that every crypto app needs is safety. What does this mean? I'm not going to even talk about UX yet, right? It's like literally safety, because the worst UX is losing your money. And losing your money is really bad. I've lost tons of money when using crypto apps in my career. It's not fun. It makes your body shake. You never want that to happen. If something happens to any crypto user that doesn't care deeply about crypto, they're gone and they never touch it for a few years. So safety is really important because we're building ultimately financial applications. No matter what, crypto is money, it's finance, it's all of that. You're importing money into your application. When you're importing money into your application, safety is top of the list. The other hand, the other hard thing about building crypto apps is that in blockchains, once something happens, it's typically very hard to reverse it. If it's happened, and then maybe you're using some like stablecoin provider that they're willing to give you your money back if you go through a few months of process. But usually, if you lose money, the money is gone. It's gone in all sorts of places that you don't want to know about. So where are all the crypto apps running? They're running on smart contracts. Smart contracts are usually contracts code that handles money that you deploy once, and then you kind of forget about. Maybe you can upgrade them, but this includes additional complexity. So there's a whole set of things that you need to get done really well to make sure that people don't lose their money. Again, if people lose your money, they're never going to use your app again. So what did we do? We built a security tool called Foundry. And I think, how many people in this room have used Foundry? All right, hell yeah. Congrats, like you're part of you're early. So Foundry started out of the idea that not only should people build and test their smart contracts, but they shouldn't need to end up going to some crazy auditing firm that will charge them $1,000 an hour to get their contract secured. Foundry was built out of a mission which is very similar to the Rust language's mission, which is empowering developers to build safe and efficient software. That's the mission of the Rust language, and I have really come to embrace it as something that's part of the mission for the Foundry project, which is that when you use Foundry, you get access to extremely advanced security tooling that masquerades as your build tool, and you run tests, and under the hood, it ends up running testing, simulations. It lets you check against your production environment. It ensures that if you're building a crypto app, the money that went into that crypto app is going to be good. No warranty, of course. If you screw something up, it's on you. But we're doing our best to ensure that this gives you the best tool for no charge that you can use in your day-to-day life to make your life better. And I think at this point, Foundry is the standard for secure and efficient smart contract development. And one of the Frontiers applicants, they said, Foundry literally changed my life, and I use it for everything, which is fantastic music to my ears, and a big shout out to this user. OK, so safety is the first thing that we need to be taking care of in smart contract development. The second thing that we need to make sure is that apps are cheap and fast. So OK, nobody lost their money, great. But if you get into the app and then you want to pay $10 to Liam, and the fee is 5 or 10 or $20 because base L1 fees, something I don't want to think about, is too high, then again, I'm out. So the blockchain scaling problem has been a hard one that we've been pondering about for years and years and years. Many people have put their contribution to that. Our contribution to that has been the Reth project. And the Reth project came naturally after we started Foundry, where we thought, OK, now that everybody can build safe code, now how is that code going to be cheap and fast? So the Reth project is something that we started building in late 2022. It started as literally something crazy as an experiment. We knew nothing about systems engineering at the time. We just knew how to build single-threaded applications that you run, forge, test, it builds, and you're done. And it really changed, I think, the game in performance engineering. We are 3 years into Reth. Reth is 1.0. It is, I think, also the standard for performance infrastructure. Here you see I favor Jesse Pollack from the Base team, who talks about how they basically have been switching all of their infrastructure to Reth because that is what's enabling them to scale to meet the demand of the Coinbase and the Base developer platform. So Base is using Reth. You will hear from Matt Seitz, our Reth lead, on how basically many projects in the industry are right now using Reth because it's not only the fastest, it's also the easiest platform to develop on for building chains that handle real load. And the third thing is frictionless, and frictionless can mean a lot of things that I talked about earlier. And frictionless does not mean just for the user, it also means for the developer. And it's not just the user experience that matters, it's also the developer experience. And when it comes to developer experience, I think we've built some of the best developer tools for backends, but we had the great opportunity during our time at Paradigm to collaborate with Tom and Jake, the authors of WAGMI and VM, who basically built the most used front-end libraries that I think most front-ends in crypto use at this point. And we came to them and we said, hey, OK, backends are fixed. Now, OK, you guys have been fixing the front ends, but there's one missing piece. So what do we do about it? And that was the origin of the Porto project, which you'll hear about from Tom later in the day, where the idea is that what if we gave devs a one-line import? You just say import Porto, you do a one-line change into your configuration of your application, and suddenly your application has superpowers. You can sign in without passwords. You can do payments at very low cost. You don't need to think about gas. You don't need to think about change. We handle account recovery, batching. The list goes on. It's a large list. And while we haven't done it yet, I hope that Porto will be the standard for frictionless crypto apps. And our aspiration is that we can get to a UX that will remind you very much so of a Stripe or a Shopify type experience, where literally you try to buy something. There's two options: buy with Apple Pay, buy with crypto. And if you want to buy with Apple Pay, you on-ramp, headless, no KYC, you don't see any third-party UI, you just on-ramp. The seller gets paid stablecoin, so the seller is covered. And if you are already on stablecoins, you just pay with crypto, you're covered, no passwords, fantastic. So stay for Tom's talk. I think it's going to blow your minds. So there's 4 things I think that the ideal crypto-powered app should have, which is A, login with passkeys or with OAuth. No passwords, no seed phrases, no Chrome extension, nothing. Just log me in like I log in to any of my favorite applications. 2, the ideal crypto-powered app should have payments with stablecoins. Stablecoins are taking off. They're everywhere. You will hear some from people throughout the day. I think it's kind of table stakes at this point. Now, after you have sign-in and payments, then you get into finance. And the 3, I think, key finance primitives are earning, swapping, and betting. And when swapping and betting, you might think are the same thing roughly, but I think there's some key differences in it. So once you have payments, then you go tell the user, hey, you have balances the app, why don't you start earning some? And when you have swapping and betting, then you can start doing even more with the user's assets. Again, there should be no crypto jargon. There should be no passwords, no gas, no chain selection, no browser extensions, no KYC to on-ramp. There are a lot of no's, and I don't know how many people that have built apps meet all of them. That's the bar. That's what we got to do. That's what we're shooting for. So to just wrap the talk, I think in 2025, the stack is ready. We have all the tools in our arsenal to do crazy things that years ago we couldn't imagine, and not just in 10 or 20 people teams. I think 2 people in 2 weeks can do serious damage these days, powered by the crypto and the AI dev tool stack. And I think this day's hackathon is going to be a test to whether we can do that actually. So please try your hardest, hit us up. We are going to help you to build awesome stuff in one day. Yeah, and everybody's working fast, so being fast is not enough, right? You have to be faster than everyone else if just the bar just got higher by default for everyone. To win, you need to be better. I think there is a very unique opportunity to import crypto in every app, which is something that we've been thinking about for a long time. How can you take a normal app and just supercharge it, just make it net better? You're not building a crypto app. You're building an app that imports crypto to solve its problems. And yeah, call to action. Let's build faster. Thank you. We're going to have an amazing day. Okay, I think we have a few minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, happy to take any.
Quick question. In terms of application, like what kind of application do you think would be interesting in the next couple of months or years?
Prediction markets. To me, that's the most interesting thing happening. I think figuring out, oracleize some piece of information. It doesn't need to be trustless. Figure out someone that's going to put the result of the thing that you want to check on chain. Let people bet on it. I think that's the use case. You saw what happened like in the election markets last year. I think it's going to keep happening. Yep.
Yeah, so like,
Give the microphone a second.
yeah, so you talk about like import crypto to every apps, right? So how do you see like the trustless nature of crypto? Are you seeing like application web 2 also have the self-custody like options? It's like gonna be another feature for people to onboard easier without KYC, or you see like at the end it will be just like, oh, enterprise will just do DeFi for you while trusted like custody of you. Like,
That's an awesome question. So the question is, as crypto is growing up, are we going to preserve the OG cypherpunk values, or while it's growing up, is it just going to be an invisible backend thing that the user is not going to experience in like a direct way, but they're going to experience it maybe in a very indirect way, such as you're in a jurisdiction where Revolut wouldn't normally go, but Revolut, because it's embraced crypto, for example, Revolut, right, is able to go to because otherwise they wouldn't be able to. And maybe they're able, because they're using crypto, they're able to offer a yield product that you wouldn't be able to use otherwise. So my view, personal view, is that it's totally OK if most of the world experiences crypto without the trustless nature. And this is something that I wouldn't have said a year or two ago. And this is something that just has come to change in my mind after seeing how to really grow things, you have to like really make compromises. There is no free lunch. So one thing that we've been saying is that like the whole cypherpunk thing might end up being like ProtonMail or Signal, where it's still massively valuable for society. It's not the best UX. Like I'm a ProtonMail customer for like 10 years, and I hate it. Literally, like I cannot even search the body of my emails because it's encrypted. But I sleep well because I know it's encrypted. But most people don't care about that. They use Gmail, right? Or most people use WhatsApp instead of Signal just because they like it better. So yeah, I also use Signal, but like not with everyone, right? So I think it's totally fine if like that's the end result. I think it's really important for the cypherpunk tech to be really good because it sets the floor. So if the floor is set by really good cypherpunk tech, then at the very least, you got transparent finance out of it, you got rules that won't change under your feet, or you at least know why the rules would change under your feet, right? And I think that self-custody, specifically for self-custody, I'm not willing to give it up as a thing that we can achieve for everyone with no UX trade-off. But the on-ramp stuff, and like again, like let's say you're in Revolut and you need to like access crypto in a more federated way, I think that's totally fine if it happens kind of like invisibly. Like that's literally like Bridge, the company that got acquired by Stripe a few months ago. It offered tremendous value to its customers, and they didn't care about crypto, right? It just happened on the background, but it was very valuable. And to me, that's a win for crypto. Maybe not a win for self-custody, but it is a big win for crypto. Yeah, Will?
Building on that, where does privacy fit in to the narrative these days for you?
Amazing question, especially given we had the Roman Storm conversation this morning or yesterday and the last few months. I think it's tough, right? Because it depends who you're building for, who your adversary is, Are you looking to build an American compliant business? Are you looking to build like an anonymous OG like private thing that you don't know who will use? Who are you okay with using the system? You know, how okay are you with potentially bad activity happening in your system? I think it's a really tough question. I think you can think of it in various ways. So, for example, like WhatsApp does end-to-end encryption, which means that you and the receiver can see what's up only. But WhatsApp also has a master key, which means that they could, if they wanted, decrypt things. But it means that your threat model is you, your counterparty, and the company, which means that, OK, like if somebody wanted to get access to all of your stuff, they would need to go subpoena like a Meta and all of the following stuff, which creates a barrier to entry to being spied. I think similarly, similar things can happen in crypto where depending on the app that's happening, whereas in Signal that's not possible because the encryption keys all live in a TE and you're hoping that's secure. So it's a trade-off depending on the business you're building. You could go all out. I think there's real UX trade-offs. For example, yesterday I was talking with Remco from World, who is basically the guru of privacy in the ecosystem. And we were talking that if you're building a wallet that does payments, you have two choices. Either you use the UTXO model, which is what Zcash, Tornado Cash, all of these guys were using, but it has like real downstream issues in how the wallet works, because the wallet needs to do a big linear scan into a bunch of information, and that just makes the wallet experience garbage. So that's really hard. But if you were to do something that's not in that model, then it's not going to be fast. So how do you even navigate that like in a good way? It's a really hard question. I think people will make like insane compromises, and I'm not sure how you can get really good UX and really good privacy together. For Porto, we had a few ideas where anytime you send a payment, it goes to a fresh address, and every time you want to spend from these addresses, you can kind of like collect the funds from all of them, put them in a dark pool, and that dark pool ideally has a snark that says it's not it's all compliant activity, and then you can like spend from that. But these are many steps away. So I think the privacy story is really tough, and it's probably the final in the Swiss cheese model of what are the barriers to like crypto adoption. I think privacy is the final boss after the UX, and maybe that's the topic of next year's Frontiers. All right. Thank you all. Next up, we're going to have Guillermo Rauch from Vercel, who's going to talk to us about one-shotting crypto apps with V0. Give it up for Guillermo.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. And it's great to be, once again, vibe coding live for everybody. So I'm really excited that we have an opportunity today to show you a little bit about V0, which is the vibe coding platform that Vercel has been working on now for quite a while. And the journey of V0 has been to go from what it started out as a design tool into a full stack vibe coding platform. So today we'll be one-shotting a full stack crypto app where the front end will be using V0 and the technologies that you know and love from Vercel, like Next.js. But the back end will be decentralized. One of the things that stood out about the presentation just now is this idea of democratizing access to payments and financial infrastructure. So it's one of the things that I've been passionate about for a while, and I think this presentation will bring it all together. So I'll be sharing my screen really quick. Let's see if it's coming in. All right, cool. And as one does, of course, the presentation itself is a V0, and it's been vibe coded right to the wire by yours truly. We've been vibe coding the slides themselves until the very last minute. So, and because, by the way, I'll be vibe coding live today, so bear with any hiccups. Today is a big model launch day for V0. I will also be giving you a sneak peek into some of the features that are only enabled on my account and are not more broadly enabled for V0 users yet that I'm really excited about. So to kick it off, Vercel, as our parent company, we're building the AI cloud. This means giving you the platform, the infrastructure, the frameworks to build AI-native applications. What does this mean? What is an AI-native application? It might be an application that takes the form of a new UI, like an assistant. It might be an application that exposes itself over MCP to another agent. Or it might be an agent itself. For example, a lot of what we've used to build V0, we've open sourced, or Vercel gives you the infrastructure primitives to build yourself. So we're also really privileged to host and deliver a lot of amazing companies, especially crypto companies and Paradigm portfolio companies as well. So super excited to be partnering with this community on building this AI cloud. And I think this is a very timely conference presentation because I believe that the two most exciting trends in the future of technology as a whole are crypto and AI. And I think there's been a bunch of memes about what the intersection point will be between these two mega trends. And I do think that vibe coding or code generation could play a fundamental role here because there's been a barrier to adoption of a lot of crypto technologies, especially when you're coming in from the Web 2 world or the traditional software world. So if we can make a lot of the primitives that you all are building more deeply integrated into vibe coding agents, then we'll be able to bring crypto to the masses. We're so back. So the premise of V0 is really simple: generate full stack applications using natural language. For most of us here, it'll be English. So you basically have this agentic UI. You write a bunch of prompts. You can also include screenshots. You can import files and other assets into your generation. But the idea is that all of the stuff that we've been building for the last 10 years, all of the hard infrastructure, all of the framework patterns, all of the UI components, Vercel wants to give them to everybody, including the best practices for how to deliver those without having to learn all of the ins and outs of software engineering. Our AI cloud has fundamentally two parts. One is the SDK, or the programming layer. The idea here is that when you bring your projects to Vercel, they will typically use some kind of known framework. We started out with very focused on front end, so Next.js, Svelte, Nuxt, et cetera. But more and more so, we've been sort of venturing into what's a full stack cloud infrastructure platform. So we just announced support for Hono. We are working on support for Express.js natively in the platform. And of course, we are partnering and integrating with vibe coding agents and building our own in V0. The other thing that I'm going to be talking a little bit about today is security is really important, I think, specifically for this industry, right? Anytime there's a security breach in the crypto world, it's so over until we come back the next week. But especially for a company like Vercel, where a lot of mission-critical infrastructure is running that powers the world, including a lot of your all's companies, security is very important to us. Something that we've embedded deeply into V0 is the ability to align the models towards secure outcomes. So I'll be generating some code today, and I want to reassure you, on one hand, we put a lot of effort into producing secure code out of the box, but I'll also give the disclaimer that when you ship code to production, we still need the human in the loop revising and ensuring and signing off on the security of that software. The other really important piece for you all to know, as you build your own crypto plus AI platforms, there's a bunch of new primitives and frameworks that you can use. One for us is the AI SDK. Think of the AI SDK as the equivalent of if Porto brings you payments, subscriptions, micropayments, tipping, et cetera, think of the AI SDK as bringing LLMs into your project. And Vercel is building a bunch of other primitives to support that. And obviously, the Vercel platform itself is secure, audited, pen-tested, et cetera, so it's a good foundation to be building on. Last but not least, everything you'll see today, we've built on Vercel ourselves. V0 is one of many agents that will exist and shape the future of the internet. If you have an idea for how to create crypto apps with agents that has a unique perspective or domain, or you want to specialize it for a certain set of technologies, we should talk because you can build that on for yourself. So today, the demo that we prepared brings this idea to reality, or this premise to reality of how can I easily infuse financial infrastructure, ideally, of course, decentralized financial infrastructure into the applications that I create. This has been a long sought dream of the internet, right? 402 is the status code of HTTP that's payment required. The grandfathers of the internet thought about 400 bad requests, very common when you're misusing an API, so it's like super top of mind. Then we have 404, missing page or resource not found. But we have 402, payment required. So clearly, the internet has been designed to embed the idea of financial infra and payments deeply into its design. It just has not happened yet. So we're so back. I think this room here could be the community that brings this dream to fruition. So for those that do not know V0, something that we're really proud of is our community. So very much like GitHub open source repos, V0 open sources or distributes examples, starter kits. There could be as little as one component, or it can be something that has already sort of foundations to start a full stack application from. So in the case of today, we're sort of bringing this new starter kit called Porto Starter. And unlike GitHub, not to diss on them, but a lot of the code that's in GitHub is kind of hard to get up and running. You have to clone it. You have to take a short PhD in developer tools. You have to get all your compilers and CLIs right. And then maybe like 10 minutes later, you have a project up and running. In the world of V0, we are making it literally one click. So I clicked and I cloned. And this is now my own playground where I can prompt and I can make all of my dreams come true. One such dream that I want to come true in this case is that, I don't know why I'm using light mode. So good, progress. But where the hell did my logos go? So instead of being frustrated at software, which we all are, of course, I can start prompting and say, like, let's draw a white background around the logos, make them larger, and overall make the page more dark mode ready. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen is a cutting-edge version of V0 that nobody but me has access to. So we're getting a glimpse of what will soon be a default in V0, which is actually an agentic development workflow. So V0 kind of started out as an assistant, very one-shot. And in fact, the title of the presentation was a little deceptive because we said we're going to one-shot crypto apps. We kind of are going to one-shot crypto apps, by the way. But you're going to see the agent sort of think through a lot of the steps of the ideal way to solve this problem. We're making the reasoning traces available to you guys. So if the agent ever goes off the rails, you can kind of audit what it decided to do. In this case, it's saying the user wants me to add white backgrounds around logos, make logos larger, make the page more dark mode friendly. I guess I was absolutely right. It captured everything I wanted. So you're going to see two new steps that if you're familiar with V0 today, you probably have not seen yet, which is we're scaling V0 to deal with very large code bases. So V0 can now explore your code base and find the precise place in which I guess it undid. It took my instruction a little too literally with white background. But now I have my two white borders around my logos. And one of the interesting things about agent mode is it's going to continue to revise my work. It has now the ability to capture screenshots. It has the ability to capture issues and auto-fix them. So it actually kind of read my mind as I was speaking. I was going to say, if V0 ever goes off the rails, we have design mode. So notice that, and this has kind of been a frustrating thing about AIs for a lot of people, if the AI ever gets something not quite perfect, there's almost no recourse unless you keep prompting and prompting and prompting. And our goal here is to actually bridge the gap with end-to-end software engineering. Think of it as like having a designer on call for your team. So I went into design mode. I selected that, and I'm now going to increase the padding. I guess that looks good to me. I'm kind of an OCD person, so I could keep doing this the whole day. Just keep improving this. But we're going to get to the crypto part soon. OK, now that I have something more dark mode, and again, just because I'm a little pedantic here, I'm going to change this to neutral 700, 800. That looks better. Notice that I was actually design moding here a component. So kind of a frustrating part about design tools sometimes can be that you change one thing and then you have to go and change 200 other things. Because V0 is aware of components, I was actually able to just change that. And again, I could keep refining the design here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you that the Porto backend is actually already deeply integrated into my V0 generation here. So the pop-up you're probably not going to see here. So I'm going to sign in. We talked about passkeys just now. The onboarding of Porto is, by the way, phenomenal. I'm a big passkey guy myself. So I'm now logged in. I had previously created my account. This onboarding flow that comes with this template already comes with both the ability to quickly sign up or sign in. I was already signed in. We integrated the concept of subscriptions. And one of the ideas that we were brainstorming for this presentation was, how cool would it be if I could create my own personal, fully decentralized version of something like Substack? So the way of the world until now has been, if you want a blog, if you want a newsletter, if you want to launch a meme coin, you have to go to someone's platform. And that platform sort of built all of the features and capabilities so that you can create your own sort of little version within that ecosystem of whatever they're offering. The way of vibe coding seems to be more going back to the world in promised land of personal software. This is my own sort of little block on the internet, and it's mine. I can actually go and press deploy here. I can deploy to production, and it'll be on my own domain name. It'll have my own keys configured for the Porto integration, and I can turn this simply into whatever I want it to be, right? So in this case, I'm going to prompt, let's take the example of once I'm authenticated with Porto, I want to, just to follow the Substack metaphor, display a selection of 3 gated articles. And because I'm short of time, I'm not even going to write the articles. I'm going to have the agent look up some recent news about the crypto world. So, and I'm going to tell it, make sure that the articles only appear if you're subscribed to tier 2 or higher. So because this comes with subscriptions built in, I'm going to go and let it cook on, 1, getting the articles and researching the space. 2, is going to examine the existing code base, and it's going to find the places in the code where it deals with authorization and where it deals with subscriptions. So interestingly enough, it's finding crypto news. Recent cryptocurrency news events, January 2025, Bitcoin, Ethereum, DeFi. Oh, cool. It's probably going to be something related to the price, is my guess. That's what we're always talking about. OK, so it got some data. By the way, this is just one example of how your agent can get data. One of the really cool things about the integration ecosystem that we're building around V0 is that you can grab, sort of your financial infra from Porto, or if you want to grab the identity layer and combine it with some other integration, you can do that. You can merge Web 2 services and Web 3 services. But also, when it comes to content, you can also bring in your own database, right? So I think this has been part of the long-held dream of finding that balance of what are the Web 2 services that make sense for my product, what are the Web 3 services that make sense for my product. So one example here, if you explore the integration ecosystem of V0, we have an integration with Supabase, where you can create more of a boomer traditional Postgres database, and also layer on some of these next-generation decentralized services. We're working with companies like Shopify to bring integrations for e-com backends. We are working with CMS companies to bring integrations into content. Most likely what's going to happen here is that as the agent researches the content for the articles, it's probably going to inline them in here. But it doesn't have to be that way, of course. You can have a database that's sourcing the articles and render them dynamically. At the end of this, we're gonna test it in this development environment. while we generate, I'm going to go back to revision number 2. One of the design principles of V0 has been sort of very similar to one of the originating principles of blockchain. Everything you do in a V0 is part of an immutable set of blocks. So I can go back in time, I can say, like, what does this look like in the beginning? If you've used Vercel before, this will ring a bell. It's a little bit like every message that I'm giving the agent becomes an immutable deployment in V0. The other thing that's happening if you go here and open a new tab is that each one of those instantiations is getting its own little sort of like preview environment. This is not your production environment. There's been news recently of, oh my God, my agent deleted my entire database. Obviously, you have to be really careful here, but one of the things that V0 does is during quote unquote development here, you're only linked to the Porto staging environment. And then once you go to prod, you can actually go and finish the swing and bring your, again, production keys. Another thing that's worth calling out here is you might be thinking, well, if I have a service with millions of users, can I actually vibe code my way into production? Like, would you actually take this code and toss it in front of, Porto.sh or Paradigm.com? And the answer is actually quite nuanced, right? Like, one of the utilities of this is that you go from idea to live application really, really quickly, and you can share it. So V0 basically acts as a communication tool. There are a lot of people in your teams that don't have the ability to write crypto apps from scratch really, really quickly. So what we do at Vercel a lot is whenever there's a new idea for how to improve our products, we immediately go to V0. We skip the design process, and basically everyone at Vercel is shipping like actual, live, interactive, working prototypes of software. So it looks like my final version here completed. So it's going to ask me to sign in to try. I'm getting, again, the continue with Porto here pop up. Beautiful. So now I'm logged in. I said tier 2 or higher, so I'm going to subscribe to tier 2. It's telling me update permissions. You must update the following permissions to continue. Spend up to 8 EXP per month. Sounds amazing. I don't know exactly how much money that is, but I'll pay it in my staging environment. Thank you, Porto, for providing a staging environment, because I'm not paying anything. OK, so now I have my subscriptions. And look at that. So now I have my premium crypto analysis. This is not financial advice. This is just generated by the AI. But again, this is a product that in 3 prompts, I created an application from scratch, integrated into Porto. Number 2, I started personalizing it to fit my design aesthetic. If I had had more time, I would have gone harder. But at least I made it dark mode. And number 3, I actually created incremental value, right? So in this case, I'm ideating having my own personal sort of Substack style platform. Another thing I'll emphasize that I kind of touched upon earlier, what Vercel is committing to do when we generate this code is to actually give you code of the quality that we ourselves would write. So the V0 team works really hard on the evaluations of code that guarantee performance, quality, security, et cetera. So as an example, this app is likely far more optimized than when you go and run a command line that says create React app so-and-so, and then you copy and paste some client-side code for integrating Porto. So a lot of what Vercel is bringing to this product is aligning the LLM towards the more performant, higher quality, and hopefully safer and more secure standards. So last but not least, I can deploy to production. If you're familiar with Vercel, this basically means bringing the code, giving it a production-grade CI/CD environment, doing a build process, et cetera. Bunch of nerd stuff that I think the Vibe coders of the future will never know existed. To do it a little bit of justice, we're still streaming the logs. But again, the idea here is let's do our best to produce production-grade software out of the prompting. OK, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sharing. Oh, literally at 10 a.m., by the way. We're really doing this live. At 10 a.m., V0, the V0 team has been partnering with OpenAI to launch GPT-5 support. It actually goes, the API access goes online at 11 a.m. So when you go to V0, you're going to be seeing this pop up. This kind of gives you a sense of how Vercel live codes, because my team is probably shipping code as I'm here in this presentation. Yeah, last but not least, the example that I created today and the starter kit will be publishing back into the community. So the recipe here for you all who want to try V0, especially with GPT-5, is go to V0 community, find the template, and press open with V0. My call to action for you all, give us feedback on how we can make V0 better for your community and your ecosystem. We're working on initiatives to align our models and give feedback back to the AI labs on how do I make sure that it's holding the Porto SDK correctly? How do I make sure that it's producing secure code? Especially for you all that work in the security realm and spend a lot of time red teaming. We want to hear feedback. We want to get your reports of generations that you would have done better, so give us feedback. We actually listen, so unlike other products, anytime you roast us here, it goes directly to me. And the team, of course. So we definitely listen to your feedback. And now I think we have some time for questions before I go back to the office and enjoy GPT-5.
Big clap for Guillermo. What did you just do?
Thank you.
I had a quick question regarding the back end of V0. So like when you prompted for the UI for the front end, how was it able to generate the back end?
Yeah, great question. So if you're, who here is familiar with Next.js Apparator or React Server Components? OK, quite a few of you. Awesome. So for those who are not familiar, the front-end world, especially React, has been going on a journey to be more full stack. React actually started because at Facebook they wanted to power like something as small as the notification bell UI or the like button. And then they realized that the React programming model was really robust and very scalable, and it could power more of their front end. And then they realized that for the front end to be performant, they needed to incorporate server-side rendering. In fact, today, I saw a tweet, people are roasting a website. There's a very famous .com that if you load it, they basically deleted their homepage. It's not there, and then it comes in 10 seconds later. You know why that happens? Client-side rendering. So React is now dual. It can do server components. It can do client components. This really plays into a huge advantage for V0, because when it's generating the front end, it can now start saying, well, here I can do server-side data fetching. Here I can define a RESTful endpoint to do a handshake or a private key exchange or whatever I need to do securely with some backend. Here I can fetch data securely from a database. There's a lot of vibe coding slop that's making it into the public internet, which is people shipping their database to the client side. I did a whole analysis recently of there's an app called T-Dating. I don't know if you saw it. In fact, I thought it was going to be funny. We had two ideas for the demo today. One was going to be a crypto AI Substack, which is the one we shipped. The other one was going to be T-Dating with crypto and AI, but it was too soon. So we didn't do it. But the problem with T-Dating was actually not vibe coding, by the way. An engineer shipped an unprotected Firebase storage bucket to the client. So this is why I'm not too harsh on the LLMs. Sometimes they can make mistakes, of course, but so do humans. And so, again, what we do with V0 is because we run React Server Components, we can say this code belongs server-side, this code belongs client-side. But of course, we're still saying if you plan to go to production with something like this, give it a final audit, call your friend, or even ask the LLM, like, yo, are you sure it's secure? Make it great, make no mistakes. You can also try that. But no, jokes aside, you can actually have the LLM reflect and speak back to you, hey, tell me more about the security model. So see, it's actually doing it. Examined current security. We'll see what happens. Sometimes it also goes really nutty. Like it thinks, oh my God, like rethink the entire world. It's not secure in this way. So you have to be careful with false positives as well. You had a question.
V0 user, I paid for V0 and created 2 apps, but I do made lots of like problems. Like one is like I made a AI voice notebook, but I don't know how to connect with the database and connect with lots of things. And so that's the problem. Before I publish the app to public. And the second is that when I want to fine-tuning the website, I want to make more beautiful or something, and click, and always like.
Yeah.
So that's two questions about first app, and I do have another question about second app, but.
Yeah, so two things you covered. One is databases. The most successful path today for databases will be to go with one of our recommended integrations. So we're constantly optimizing and refining our integration with systems like Supabase and Neon and making more and more progress. One shortcut there that you can take is instead of having V0 start from scratch, we have a lot of really cool templates that already come with the database pre-installed. For example, one that I really like that is in the community forums, in the community list. Actually, our Cyberpunk dashboard design is one of our most popular. So you're going to find here templates that already integrate the database. So that's always better, because the LLM just like it starts from a higher starting point. By the way, another thing for those that care more about the design but don't have the patience of your second point, which is like I have to refine everything. We are publishing more and more templates that are very prompt friendly. For example, this one here, the Pointer AI landing page, most of that was generated in V0 itself. So it's almost like a guarantee that V0 will be able to reason really well about the design and make it your own. I saw a demo on X of someone saying, turn the green into a completely different color, and it just like really beautifully themed it. So long story short, for databases, I recommend starting with a template that already integrates the database. Same with auth. There's a really banger sign in with X demo here in the community. So instead of telling the agent, implement auth from scratch, just start with that. And then same with with design. We're working really hard on design mode. It's really important to us. So if you have feedback about how it's not getting a certain changed right, another really cool escape hatch that you have is that because I'm targeting an element there, if something is not fully supported in the design mode, I can still prompt it. So I'll give you an example. If I hover, it's blue. If my design team saw that, they would fire me. So I would say, instead of wishing that design mode had hover support, I can say, fix the hover state to be a really cool gradient animation in a light gray. So and we let it cook. Next question. I think he has one. Just to decentralize the questions.
Thank you. So would V0 consider adding blockchain as a backend in the future? Like we have foundries, right? I can imagine like we have a VM running foundry, then people can do smart contract development, deployment, and then Portal login, and everything built at the app within V0.
Yeah, so our approach to adding backends is twofold. I mentioned there's some first-party integrations. So if I go here, actually, this is not my blog. I would have to fork it. But if I go to here. So all of these are the first-party integrations in V0. We work hard to write evals for them to make sure that the code is high quality. We automatically provision the backend in a lot of cases. We spin up the account on the service provider side. So these are the ones that are like really easy to use. A good example here, by the way, is AI integrations. So if you want to tell the system to use AI, meaning you're using AI to build an AI app, we have a bunch of integrations with models. So it feels very native. These are more like the native integrations. But in the case of Porto, what was really cool is that we didn't build a Porto integration per se. We just vibe coded into a default template, and then we're giving you the template. In the future, especially if this continues to get traction, we can do a first-party integration here. So we can do first-party Porto integration, we can do a first-party Coinbase integration, et cetera, to sort of start to incorporate more Web3 plus services.
All right. Give it up for Guillermo.
Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing. Next level. One thing that well, firstly, what Guillermo just did in the demo, I think is like absolutely insane, and I think we should all give it a try. One thing that we didn't see is that because he was screen sharing his browser, and because the demo was running inside of V0, when you're using Porto inside of like some like third-party platforms, it will not launch the pop-up that you would see in iframe mode. So normally you would see it like as part of the app, so that it's part of the full screen of the app. So it came up in a pop-up. If you're doing your own app afterwards, you will see that it happens inside of the app, and you would see, continue with Porto, passkey, all of that. So just keep that in mind. So next up, we'll have Henry Stern, the CEO and co-founder of Privy, to talk to us about leveraging protocols to transform UX. Give it up for Henry.
Hello. Very unfortunate to go after Guillermo's demo, but here I am. This is a talk that I am giving for the first time. I think Georgios came up with a title, so I tried to fit the talk to the title. But the question is, working within a space that has so many standards and protocols that you can pick from and try and leverage to build really good experiences, how do you actually make good use of these? Don't lose yourself in the idea maze that's available to you, but also future-proof the infra that you're building or the product that you're building in order to actually make use of these protocols in productive ways. So the other alternative title might be, how to tame protocols to build lasting products in a fast-moving space. It's a little bit less catchy. But broadly, I'm Henry Stern. I'm the co-founder of Privy. We build embedded wallets and onboarding infrastructure so people can access crypto rails much more easily. The goal is to enable developers to build secure experiences that enable any user to own assets directly within their products. And so I'm excited to talk about some of the lessons that we've learned trying to leverage protocols to build really great developer tooling and in turn enable great UX. So why does this matter? I think done right, you get to ship better products faster. You get to have future-proof infrastructure that will not go sort of out of date, even though the space that you're operating within is changing very, very quickly. So done right, if you leverage protocols, you basically get to leverage new developments in the space easily as they come out. For example, DeFi is moving at an incredibly fast pace. You don't want to have to re-architect your product to leverage the latest advance here. You should have a stack that is future-proof to the work that other people are doing in the space. That's arguably the entire point of these open systems. And likewise, you should not sort of hinder yourself by picking the wrong abstraction and then finding that you've built yourself into a hole a couple years down the line and you have to re-architect your entire product. So this is what, hopefully being thoughtful about protocol selection gets you. Conversely, I would argue that done wrong, this will destroy you. And this will destroy any chance you have at shipping, anything at all, let alone a product with good UX or good DX. So done wrong, you will not ship. UX will become sort of a slave to the technical constraints that you've picked out up front. And broadly, you'll pick your audience based on the tooling available to you rather than the other way around. So I care about this, partly because of my work at Privy. And before this, because I was a protocol researcher at a company called Protocol Labs, I worked on a system called Filecoin, which is building basically long-tail storage marketplace on top of distributed systems. And I think what I saw there was these incentives that we build in crypto are incredibly powerful, but if misused, they're incredibly hard to use. So there we go. Taking a step back, and I promise this is the end of the shilling, I kind of posit that the entirety of our work at Privy is about enabling access to protocols for users. We build basically the abstraction stack that enables flesh and blood individuals to access distributed systems and crypto rails without having to think about the stack and set of protocols that are on top of it. And I think Georgios talked about this in his intro. By and large, having to get a computer science PhD in order to use basically digital ownership rails has been a major hindrance to the space, and how we get to translate these things is incredibly important. And so I think a lot of our work is an exercise in balancing the tension between picking the standards and working on top of the standards that power the space, but not being so beholden to them that we actually sacrifice things that enable people to actually use these products meaningfully. So I'm going to use a case study for this talk, and broadly, the case study is embedded wallets. So embedded wallets are really an abstraction that enable any developer to spin up self-custodial wallets for any user coming in without forcing the user to download an extension, save a pass, a mnemonic, or otherwise think about the fact that they're doing fairly advanced cryptography under the hood of what they do. The three sort of design targets for us are the wallets have to be secure, they have to be extraordinarily flexible and performant, and they have to adhere to the self-custodial guarantees that we set out. The owner of the wallet should be the only party that can access the wallet's keys. And sort of the optimization for us is how do we make this as smooth an experience as possible for the developer building with the system, but also for the end user benefiting from it. And the constraint is we don't want to have to redesign this every single time a new advancement comes out in the space underneath. So without further ado, I guess some lessons building embedded wallets. It's a study in 4 parts, and I tried to make this as sort of protocol-centric as I could. So the trigger warning is, unfortunately, I guess there's a lot of Ethereum here, so there will be acronyms and numbers, and hopefully we'll lean into it, but there's a bit of alphabet soup. So leaning into that, I'm actually going to work my way up the stack and look at how do we build basically from a core architecture in picking the protocols that we need for key management and distributed key management in order to ensure self-custody, to the developer experience actually leveraging the system that we've built, all the way to then the extensions that we can build on top of embedded wallets to make sure that they interoperate with the space as market needs evolve. So this will get somewhat technical, but we'll see. So chapter 1 is follow the user. Ultimately, the core lesson here is that the protocol choice up front will end up kind of pinning you to a, call it window of performance trade-offs that you're going to have to stick to. And so it's very important to be very clear about the product requirements that you have as you set out to build. So for us, the goal, and I want to make sure that all these stories are kind of grounded in, how are you thinking about what you're trying to get out of the protocols that you might leverage? The goal is to have secure, performant infra. And I talked about this before. This is how we power, ultimately, the underlying systems of the embedded walls. This is how we make key management accessible to users who otherwise don't care about key management in a way that they are the only party in control of those keys. So for us, Privy's core architecture combines 2 core technologies. This is TEEs, secure enclaves, in which all key reconstitution happens, and key splitting via Shamir secret sharing. So we basically, whenever a wallet is created, split keys immediately. And then we help orchestrate sort of key share management to ensure that keys are only ever reconstituted in an environment under the appropriate owner's control. So only the owner has access to the wallets themselves, and this is cryptographically enforced. But there should be enough sort of flexibility into the system that we are able to build this for different types of owners, businesses, individuals, servers, agents, and so on and so forth. So the 3 choices that we had up front in terms of technologies that were kind of available to us, and each of these are protocols, as it were. One was TSS-based MPC, so threshold signature signing, what people commonly refer to as MPC in the space. The second was Shamir secret sharing. This is like an old cryptographic workhorse. I think the paper's from like 1972, broadly used across every password manager that you've ever played with. I think HashiCorp Vault uses it. Cloudflare has some on some of their secrets management products. And then the third is TEs. They come in many different flavors. I think you want to be very mindful of which type of secure enclave you use. But there's been really good advances with like sort of enclave virtualization across the Amazon cloud and Google Cloud recently. So it's become a much more viable technology. So we looked at this. To give it up, we used basically a split of TEs and SSS. TEs give us an extraordinarily performant, flexible environment in which to do all key reconstitution, but SSS gives us the ability to actually have variable sort of trust, which is to say we can split the keys and have the shares be distributed amongst the appropriate parties to ensure that the right people need to approve reconstitution in order for any keys to be regenerated on behalf of the end user. So why this, and why not MPC? And this is where I'm going to go into maybe some spicy takes. And ultimately, I think that the main thing I'll say, to be a little bit more PC, but I happen to believe this, is that protocols evolve, and the stack you build should evolve alongside these protocols. As trade-off spaces change, you should be able to change the underlying protocols that make up your product in order to adapt to best-in-class like tooling today. At the time we made this decision, and I believe this holds today, the core concerns with TSS-based MPC, which has advantages as compared to the solution we picked, namely the advantage is the keys are never reconstituted. So there's no single point of failure. We're dependent basically on a trust assumption with TEEs, which is that the secure hardware doesn't get breached. If that goes away, then anybody with access to servers has access to secrets. TSS does not have this flaw. There's never any reconstitution. It's basically a putting together of multiple signatures to generate the end signature from the wallet in a way that doesn't have this. Unfortunately, it has two core issues that we felt were sort of dead on arrival. The first is speed. We serve a lot of trading apps. We serve a lot of consumer products. And going at it from a product requirements, multi-second signing times is not possible for a lot of our customers. The second is security. Whilst the theoretical security of a lot of the MPC systems is superior, this is a very new algorithm. I think the first paper with a viable TSS scheme is from 2017. It's by this fellow called Yehuda Lindell. And you just won't have had as many reps building basically with TSS-based MPC as you would other architectures, which means that I think, at least so far in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, there have been basically hacks found in the largest TSS-based MPC libraries. Protocols take time to mature, and you don't want to be the first to test out security primitives. So with that, we'll come to our first lessons. First, protocols set a baseline. If you have to fight your protocol in order to get to your product requirements, you are going to spend your life basically fighting your own product. Here, I've kind of grayed out the competitors. This is very self-serving, but these are citing latency tests that we did basically on the core architecture before optimization. So at the time, we have, for example, co-location of servers in the main geographies that we serve, which shave off the majority of the 300 millisecond signature average here, because that's like network round trip times. But basically, pre any optimizations, these are the sorts of times that you see. The first two here basically use a mix of either on-device or TE-based architectures. The back two use MPC, and it shows from the, I guess, 2.5 second to 5.5 second latency that you may need from this. So again, be very clear about what are the non-negotiables in your product requirements up front. Otherwise, you're going to spend your life fighting the protocol that you're trying to build on top of. The second lesson is protocols need time to mature. This is not to say don't be an early adopter. This is to say early adoption comes at a premium. Be super, super, super clear on why you need to be an early adopter, because if you don't, it's better to let other people chew through this. This is a bit of a coward sentence when it comes to protocol design, but you don't want to be the first party that has to run into production bugs on security systems. And I think Fireblocks, which uses MPC, has decided that this is one of the core things that they are going to be great at, and they are. And it just has become a focus for the company in a way that few others can actually do. So again, I think this is one of the many issues that have existed in open source like MPC libraries, but a reason why you might not want to leverage them unless you're actually prepared to really invest in the systems. All right. Second story, we're going to go up the stack. So we're actually going to look at what does integrating an embedded wallet look like. And here the lesson for me is hitch a ride. If there are protocols that you can lean on to ease basically adoption of your tooling, you absolutely should. And the goal is to build idiomatic interfaces for wallets. So I think one of the best early decisions that we made at Privy was making our embedded wallet systems 1193 providers. Now, what does that mean? EIP 1193 is the set of RPC methods or calls that wallets have to adhere to in Ethereum. It's an insanely valuable standard because it basically makes it that you don't have to fight basically every third-party wallet provider, from MetaMask to Rainbow to all of that. They all adhere to the same standards. As a developer integrating wallets, you just need to make sure that you support these RPCs and you're good to go. And I think we definitely weren't the first people to build embedded wallets, but to my knowledge, we were the first to actually be very, very stringent about adhering to standards that every other wallet played to. And the point was to say, by doing this, our embedded wallets are not toy wallets. They are functionally indistinguishable from MetaMask and from any other system, and that gets us three things. It gets us better UX for your users, in that a user's a user no matter how they come in. If your user is hyper crypto native, if your user has all of their assets in MetaMask, they're probably not moving away, and they should be able to come in with the system that you've built. But if your user doesn't know or doesn't care about crypto, you shouldn't have to force them down that path. And yet, for you as a developer, you need a set of interfaces that can respect all of these users. So that's the first piece. The second is BetterDX. Obviously, you don't want to force, unless you can help it, your early adopters to have to rethink their mental models for how your product works. So being able to piggyback off of existing standards makes adoption of the tooling much, much simpler. And finally, it actually future-proofs the product because, again, as you think about Aave, Morpho, Kimono, all of these different yield generation protocols in DeFi as an example, these are folks, Camino, not Kimono, these are folks who are working off of existing standards, and you want to be able to basically have them work out of the box. And adhering to the standards that exist in the space gives you that. So lesson 3 is where you can lean on existing protocols. It will completely ease adoption of the tooling or the setup that you have. And I think this holds, obviously we're talking about developer tooling, but this holds in terms of UX. Don't reinvent patterns. I think one of crypto's major flaws was forcing people to go through a connect button on the top right. A lot of people don't want to do that. It should be an option to those that want to, but if things are working on the internet in a certain way, unless it is your core mission to reinvent that pattern, don't reinvent the pattern. Let people connect to your systems in the way that they're used to. Our third story, I'm going to try to speed up, is stay loose. Don't overbundle with protocols early. So I want to nuance the earlier point I made about not being an early adopter. I think it's important to use tried and tested protocols, but I also think it's important to lean into abstractions as they improve. And so the question is, as you try and do both, how do you actually do this in a way that gives you the appropriate margin for error as protocols kind of harden over time? So the goal here is gas sponsorship, put very plainly, and a core functionality of Privy Wallets is the ability to integrate with other on-chain systems, smart accounts, multi-sigs, and different tooling there very, very easy. And this is a story really of two protocols. On the one side, you have ERC 4337, which is a smart account standard that defines how you can basically build user accounts where the wallet itself sits on chain and has a signer that the user holds to act on behalf of this wallet. And the second is 7702, which is a newer standard that basically tries to enable custom validation logic for transactions without requiring an on-chain account, but basically by having EOAs be able to use that on-chain validation logic directly. Now, if you were anywhere near ETH Denver circa 3 years ago, and you were not working on 4337, you were wasting your time. And you were working with outdated tech, and the world was going to change out from under you, and there was no point in doing anything that you were doing with EOAs. Now, I think 3 years hence, the results are in, and that turned out not to be true. 4337 is a great standard. It's moved the space forward, but also it is a very small part of actual blockchain usage out in the space. And so I think a very real threat to people building tools is to jump too early on protocols that are still forming and still being shaped. And so I think one thing that we did really well here is try and balance basically how can we embrace protocols to make sure that our customers that want new sort of cutting edge technology can get it without building ourselves into a corner should the world shift in another direction. And so what did we do here? First, and this is what we're doing with 7702, we're following the same playbook, you want to gauge interest. Give people early, easy ways to start engaging with these things. We build basically we do a lot of dog fooding with these protocols, and this is a guide that we have for integrating with EIP 7702. Again, because we follow standards, everything is compliant already. But we're going to ask our developers who want it the most to actually help do this integration with us so we can learn from their experience and figure out how to model this better. Second, from there, you can sort of optimize and make the setup of these integrations better. So this is actually what happens with our 4337 integration, and the same is happening right now for 7702, is we basically bundle the two. You've got account creation, when a user comes into your app and creates an account and ultimately a pair of signing keys. Now, by default, this creates an embedded wallet, an EOA that they can use to hold and manage assets. But if you've turned on the smart wallet module, in a sense, they were basically piping this into a smart account system, whereby the account creation will also sort of spin up a factory in order to create the smart account, and then set up the embedded wallet as a signer into that factory so that the user can basically, by default, do this. And so this abstracts the complexity of the smart account from the developer wholly, but it doesn't change our interfaces fundamentally. And this is the third thing, is there's protocol development on the one side, but the second is there's infrastructure development to serve the protocols. So what you have here is a never-before-seen screen with Ithaca and the integration of 7702 standards into the same space. But broadly, what we do is we enable developers to pick the smart wallet providers they want to use. So the drop-down here has different factories that developers can pick from in order to spin up their smart account contracts. And then from there, you can actually pick your own paymaster and bundler URLs so that you get some choice around the interface. Because again, this is a sort of two-sided risk if you're looking at future-proofing. Have I picked the right protocol? And have I picked the right infrastructure provider who won't go out of business and have me rethink my entire sort of stack? So this is kind of how we've managed, in a sense, integrating developer protocols, which is making sure that you lean into these advances, but don't overbundle too early, and make sure you test the benefits of these things in prod before making them a default for your product, and before forcing every user to have to interface with these. And finally, insofar as you can help it, try to build for composability. A lot of teams have great ideas about how to advance protocols. I think you should be healthily skeptical about whether or not it's worth making a breaking change in order to serve one sort of application or standards developer over the rest. With that, and I promise I'm almost done, don't wait for protocols. This is the fourth lesson. Protocols and waiting for protocols to be ready will kill you. And I argue will kill a space if it happens too quickly. And this is why, again, to Georgios' point, this is as exciting a time as I've ever seen in crypto in terms of people going and building things and moving the space forward in fundamental ways. So the goal here and the experience that I want to talk about is secure wallet delegation. It's an extraordinarily important part of UX that we're seeing come out as more and more fintechs and trading platforms adopt crypto rails. And it is one that has been, going through a lot of protocol work, where I would argue we're still very much in the plasma form of universe formation. The planets have not yet solidified. So this is a story about session signers. This is what we call it, and delegated permissions in Privy. And broadly, the question is, how do you delegate access to your wallet to a third party that can act on your behalf? So for example, here this is a very simple thing. A user spins up a wallet, delegates access to the wallet in a permissioned way to a third-party app signer. And this could be a platform that wants to do dollar cost averaging on your behalf or portfolio rebalancing on your behalf. Or this could be, and this is happening more and more, an agent that wants to trade on your behalf, that wants to do micropayments for you if you give them a budget and allowance as they surf the web. And so, how do we actually do this in a decentralized, verifiable way? So, circa 2023, 2024, this is the standard space. And the broad idea is you are seeing sort of a war to own the standard and the guidelines. And this is a very good thing. I think it's very easy to see this cynically. But reality is, these are very deep technical questions that are being asked by these teams that are disagreeing about the way in which these things should work. And you're seeing this, 7715, 6900, and then a few variations of Coinbase systems all vying to be the default. So what did we do? We basically said, this is great. You should be able to integrate these. But also, let's have an off-chain version of these protocols so that we're not hung up on moving the space forward while the standards coalesce. And so we actually built a standard of our own into secure enclaves to enable basically tight policies and delegation in a way that is chain agnostic and that doesn't basically depend on a standard being agreed to. And the idea is that very quickly you can move these permissions on-chain or off-chain, but you're not stuck waiting for the right on-chain protocol to emerge in order to do this. And so this is the last lesson, is don't delay shipping a protocol. Think in terms of protocols, but experiment with off-chain where you can. So with that, I'm going to conclude. I think the delta and the gap between UX and protocols, I was looking for this picture, a picture of this side. And if you want to find it yourself, the Google term, which I think is very poetic, is called paths of desire. When the UX basically is broken and the user or the developer ends up charting their own course through what you thought they were going to do. This is apparently called a path of desire. And I think basically protocols are trying to approximate future paths of desire and look at what will the space seek to enable and how can we codify this. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. And I think as with art, great protocols will kind of outlive us all and prove to be extraordinarily sticky. This is the case for TCP/IP. And as with art, there's a ton of shit out there, and you should be very, very wary of buying what you think is a masterpiece, and actually you've just bought a dud. And so the sort of final lesson for me as we work in a fast-moving space is this lesson from a book that I like. The more dynamic the situation, the poorer your foresight will be. Don't try and predict the future, but try to build optionality so you can actually move in this uncertain world. And so with that, I would say lean in to using protocols because they will accelerate your product, and maybe most importantly, they will give your users superpower as the space continues to expand. This is what's so special about crypto. But on the other side, make sure that you price the protocol choices you make, and don't tell yourself that you should be waiting on a protocol to happen in order to build your product, because it is almost never true. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions for Henry?
Yeah, great talk. A big fan of Privy, and we're also using Privy for a lot of products. So quick question, because we have right now we have tons of probably dozens protocols, right? Do you have sort of some strategy in the future to automatically or to onboard into all different protocols, even sort of the virtual machines are different?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really think it depends on the flavor. At least what I try to do is figure out an ontology for what are these protocols good for. And so, for example, we've had to think about this in terms of chain support, where we've tried to figure out what is a tiering system so we can unblock developers using Privy very quickly. If they want to use an exotic chain that they're the only ones to use, they shouldn't be stuck on us, and we should offer basic key management. But then from there, we should have abstractions that kind of layer up to giving them a policy engine, webhooks that react to on-chain events and so on. And so the honest answer is, I think we have a strategy on a sort of categorical basis. So we have a strategy for obviously new protocols as pertains to chain support, for new protocols as pertains to spend permissions and gas sponsorship. And these we typically build out by basically doing one or two manual things first. So for gas sponsorship, for example, the EVM and the SVM story are very different. So we basically try to make sure that we build always with two things that are different up front, so we don't overfit to a single protocol. And then we try to generalize that ontology so it becomes easier for us to adopt other protocols. But the goal under the hood, and this is something that we're actually building out right now, is to completely abstract away the protocol. At the end of the day, the early adopters will care that you're using 4337, 7702, or whatever else it might be. But most people just want to put in a credit card and think that they don't have to care about gas anymore. And so this is one space where I actually think the space has matured enough that we can provide that experience now and actually abstract away the protocols for the people who don't want to. I don't know if that answers your question, but amazing. Oh, I don't know if.
So we're moving into a world where machine-to-machine payments are becoming more and more frequent. So how do you think about designing wallets not just for human users but also for AIs and delegating to AIs and all of that sort of interaction? Might this be different from, let's say, just getting an everyday user on board?
Yeah, I think this has been one of the most delightful things I've found working on Privy, which is you can find very different customers whose needs actually, if you look at it through the right abstraction lens, are corresponding. And so the example here is we had a lot of agentic trading customers that came to us and said, I want to enable agents to trade on my user's behalf. I want to have them run strategies, basically, that the user should be able to benefit from when the user's not around. How do I do this securely? Because obviously a hallucination is going to completely wreck my user and their balance. And so this is where we started investing very heavily in a very granular policy system. And since then, we've actually found that financial institutions, banks in particular, actually really need these same policies to codify the sorts of risk management they have on, we want a manual review on any wire being sent out over $1 million or things like that. So that's a small aside, but actually, very interestingly, I think a lot of what we're seeing on the micropayments and agentic space corresponds to problems that we're seeing elsewhere. I think the big change is going to be, threefold. And one is unresolved, in my opinion, and two are mostly works in progress but resolved. The first is obviously policies. How do you account for failure modes, basically, and how are you a little bit better about defining a very clear threat model for the agent going off the rails? And I think that's broadly a solved problem via policy engines. I think there's some, mileage will vary depending on how on-chain or off-chain you seek to be, but we know how to handle this, and it's a mix of API-based policies via transaction simulation, because there's 1,000 ways to drain a wallet, and so any sort of signature-based or call-based policy there is going to fail. And then enclave-based policies, in our case, to verify recipients, allow lists, and so on. The second problem is communication with the agent. And here, obviously, MCP does us all a great service. We have support for MCP servers, and broadly, I think that's also a solved problem, which is how do you get the agent to actually understand what the wallet is? I think the unsolved problem, and there's some cool space happening cool work happening in the space. I think of a few teams doing really good things here, is authentication. I think agent-to-wallet authentication remains super fucking gnarly, because short of giving the agent a private key, which has its own set of risks, there's really no clean way to do this. And this is something where we've sort of been stumped on how do we actually build really a foolproof, secure authentication system whereby the agent has access to the wallet on the appropriate basis, but does not risk leaking that access to a malicious third party. And I think for the most part, right now, the sort of poor man's way out is better policies. Let's make sure that if the authentication systems fail, it's not that costly. But that, I would say, is the biggest unsolved problem. But we're seeing a lot of exciting stuff there. And we were bought by Stripe fairly recently, and obviously agentic commerce is something that they're very excited about. So lots more coming there.
All right. Give it up for Henry.
Thank you.
Amazing. So Privy, I think, is one of the biggest success stories in crypto, and I think they have done, that was dangerous. I think they have done more than most of us to advance the state of crypto. Now we're going to hear from Sofiane Larbi, our entrepreneurial resident at Paradigm, with who we've been working on consumer apps, who's going to tell us about the consumer frontier. Give it up for Sofiane.
How's it going? It's kind of interesting to hear myself on the mic. But yeah, I'm here to talk about consumer. I've sort of branded myself as a consumer guy in general, as like a career choice. And the feedback I've always got on this has been like, consumer's hard. And I think what people usually mean is that consumer is like hard and intractable. But I think my contrarian take and what I want to convey to you guys is that consumer is indeed hard, but it's not an intractable problem. And I think the reason for why people usually call it hard is that like consumer's an incredibly binary space where you have this like winner-take-all dynamic. And we have like very few incumbents that capture an extremely large amount of value. Like just think about the like apps you use on your phone. I'd imagine most people in the audience have a similar like top 3 screen time apps. And then of the screen time that you spend on your phone, I'd imagine most of it is concentrated in those top 3. And I think the reasons for these binary is that like incumbents are able to generate this like compounding flywheel from the network effects of like owning a social graph and having like user-generated content and distribution advantages like already built into your devices. And I think this results in a sort of unideal situation for founders where you have like extremely high cost of user acquisition, extremely high churn by default, and you have like a very narrow window to wow your users into staying. And even once they like go through your onboarding funnel, you need some sort of like interesting technical moat in order to like keep them there and like have like basically a good product in general. And I think there are a few tailwinds right now which make consumer an interesting place to be working, especially at this time. This is sort of the why now of this talk. Of like, I think AI is sort of like on everybody's minds in the Valley and in the world. And I think another interesting thing that has been like explored pretty well by sort of like people in this room and people that you may work with, but sort of hasn't expanded much outside of this ecosystem, is sort of like the stablecoin monetization thing, which I'll get into more. But I think like the key to understanding and like modeling AI in your consumer apps is as like an augmentation on your users' like creative efforts. I think one way to think about it is like TikTok was able to create this like well of content that people want to watch by reducing the like cognitive load on like producing fun videos with CapCut, and I think that this is sort of the model that you should have when you're integrating AI into your products. Like, how do I use it to like augment my users' creativity without sort of just like creating a bunch of slop? And I think it's an interesting time now where the moat of like the big AI companies is really not that big on consumer. I think like the key moat is obviously like distribution. But I think like from a model perspective, like the open source models are really quite good. So I think small teams can really compete in this space. And then the other interesting thing, the way I like to think about stable coins and like crypto monetization is like you sort of create like these like in-game, in-app worlds, and you're sort of like the overlord of this world, and you want to like extract rent, and so you want to create like these like micro economies, and that's like an interesting way of thinking about your business that like is quite differentiated from just like having people paying for a product. And it's also like global by default, which allows for interesting scale. And then like, I guess part of this talk is to like leave you guys with some alpha on like what you should be doing if you really want to get into consumer as a space. And I think there are like 3 dimensions that you need to push on and maximize, and I really think that you need to have all 3. The first of which being like virality. You need to really understand your user or like culture, and you need to have a product that has like a core idea or like core content that's like inherently viral and people want to spread because it's like controversial or funny or like personal. And distribution, I think, is separate in that it's about like putting your top of funnel in the right place and optimizing the funnel all the way down to users like being in this ecosystem. And then I think the most important thing right now is building an interesting technical moat that makes it hard for people to like spin up copycats, and that's where you really find like new alpha in consumer. I think like the way to think about virality is like as an engineering problem. You really want to tap into your like users, even not just the users, but like the people talking about your product. And you need to understand culture really well, particularly the type of culture that's sort of upstream. I think there's like sort of like places on the internet whose culture is determined by other places, and you can think about it as sort of a DAG. And I think TikTok and like 4chan are examples of like top of DAG, like upstream culture. And you want to like build your product in such a way that like the workflows of the users are like high visibility, are like meant to be shared, and like sort of spread on their own. And the challenge is obviously like building virality without only building for virality. And then distribution, I think an interesting strategy is like building MVPs or building mini apps as MVPs, and leveraging the network effects of existing platforms like TikTok or Twitter. And it's also about like obsessing over onboarding and getting your user in the app, getting them to invite their friends. And I think the challenge with the mini app strategy is like, how do you get it to your own platform that you control, where you can actually extract value? And then I think you want to like leverage some sort of technical insight in order to really have a moonshot outcome. And I think like the ones that I'm focusing on right now is like AI as augmentation for your users' creativity, and stable coins as a monetization engine, sort of like GDP creation tool, internet GDP creation tool. I think everybody sort of understands that you want to like be working with frontier technology, but I think the key is leveraging it in the right way that works with distribution and virality. And then, like, as examples of apps, I think the T app is an incredible job of being a very inherently viral idea. And the people who are spreading it are not even like the real users, which is the genius of it. As a distribution-wise, I think something interesting, like Kaido did a good job of this, of like building a sort of super app on top of an existing app like Twitter. I think Linktree is another example, like all the like card, like the things that you put in your bio, where it sort of leverages the network effects of Twitter. And then for technical moonshots, I think like Pika, Character AI, and Warpcast are interesting in that like they're sort of shots on goal of like building new experiences with frontier technology. And I guess I want to demo a few things that I've been working on. The first one is this app called Blast Buddies, which is sort of like, it's like a Pokemon Go X like tower defense thing, where like you see all your friends on a like Find My Friends interface, and then you can like shoot them, and then they have like a certain amount of time to like get out of the blast radius, and you can like take their coins. Like you get like a coin every hour, yeah, and it's sort of like something meant to be played with your friends. And I think the reason why it's interesting is like using the like IRL flash mob mechanics of making. I think it's just like a great source of content. Like imagine like everybody like runs out of this room because like somebody's shooting us, I think it's interesting because it's mobile first. Like you can get user social graph from their contacts, which is I think is key. You can sort of imagine like a marketplace of like defenses and offensive capacities. Like the technical interesting thing is like if you sort of have money riding on your location, then you need to be able to prove it. Leveraging client-side TEs like Apptest, which is the iOS framework, makes it actually work like technically without being like botted. And then like from the like frontier tech side, I think like Porto is an interesting thing, which is the next talk, where it makes it really easy for like Web 2 builders to build experiences that leverage some element of blockchains for like stable coins and authentication. It's great for me because like I don't want to have to use the Apple payment system because then I have to pay them 30%. You sort of have built-in authentication. I think one issue with this right now is that like you want to get extra information from authentication, like you want to get their email or their friends or whatnot, and like having like default passkey authentication doesn't work for that. But like if somebody were to build a ecosystem around passkey authentication where you sort of have cross-app passkeys, then you actually do get this. I'm excited for that. And then like the financialization capacity of it makes it like an interesting idea. It's not financialized right now, but like it could be. If you want to play it, there's a test flight link. I'll give you a few seconds to snap that. Privacy warning, like it does like it's like a location-based app, so it will share your location to your contacts. But yeah, and then I think another interesting thing that I've been working on that's sort of like on the distribution side of things is this product where like you see a video on TikTok, and people right now will do this thing, like I'm investing in this video at 5 likes. And I sort of wanted to build that into an experience. And so we have this bot on TikTok that's like this logo, and we have the @invest handle. So like if you tag @invest on any video on TikTok, you sort of like record your investment in the video at that number of likes, and then you sort of like accumulate more and more of this like fake currency, and you can see yourself on a leaderboard with your friends, like who is able to spot viral content before it goes viral. So I think this is interesting because it's sort of, I'm not fighting TikTok for users. I'm just using the TikTok's like monopoly on screen time to like build a product, which I think is a fun challenge and an interesting angle. So like there's no onboarding, there's no authentication. You just start tagging a bot in the comments. Sort of unbeatable UX. And I think it's good because it's also like a ritualistic thing. Like every week you come back to check your status on the leaderboard. And I think the challenge with this is like getting to your first like 1,000 users, and then getting users sort of off platform into something that where you can like capture value is also the challenge. And yeah, I wanted to leave you guys with some alpha, some things that I think would be cool to build that I'm not building. I think like Love Island was a big thing a few weeks ago, and I think an interesting thing would be like building live TV, sort of engineering it from the ground up for markets to be built on top of it. And I think the key is have those markets be sort of first-class primitives within the show, where like it's sort of bi-directional, like the things that happen in the show are a result of the odds that like Kalshi is predicting or whatnot. The other thing is Trivia HQ, which is a big thing back in like 2016, which I think like I'm using as an example of like game shows that anybody can participate from their phones at any time. And I think the key here is that it's like Trivia HQ is free to play, and I think the key is to make it sort of a game and not like a lottery ticket. And then the other interesting thing, which is like a little more research heavy, is like decision markets for social media content. Like imagine like you're a really good shit poster. You can sort of suggest tweets to a brand account or like a shared market controlled account. And then based off of the odds of that tweet going viral, like people can trade on the odds. It's like either sent or not. And you can imagine like people can make a living off of just being really good posters, which I think would be pretty cool to see, and it's also something that I think brands would pay for as sort of like advertising, but also engagement. So yeah, that's the alpha for today. If anybody has any questions, open to taking that.
Thanks. My quick question was, what made you stop working on TRM.news? It was like a prediction market, right?
Yeah, Tomorrow News was the thing I was working on when I first joined Paradigm, which was a text-based prediction market. And I think the reason for that was because I was really interested in getting sort of normie users. And I think like the way that it would be used is sort of as sort of gambling, and so I didn't think it would be that valuable to normie users who like aren't like total gambling degens. I think like it's interesting as like a source of alpha. Like you can use markets to like generate information and like coax it out of the places where it's hidden. But I think like as a consumer product, it wasn't like it didn't really find PMF.
Awesome. Okay, so Sofian just now gave us some alpha on like how to build consumer apps. You should find him after because he has a lot more to give. So the next person is Tom. Tom and I met a few years ago when he was not working full-time on WAGMI and VM. WAGMI and VM are the most used front-end libraries in crypto. If you're using a crypto front-end, you can connect wallet, confirm everything. It's using one of these two things. It is with great honor that we've had the opportunity to work together through all of these times. And then at some point, we said, OK, what do we try to take it a notch further and see if we can fix UX at the wallet, at the auth layer, the payments layer? So that was the birth of Porto, which is the topic of today's talk. So give it up for Tom, who's going to give us a very deep dive on Porto and its future.
Thanks. All right. Let's make sure that I got this. All right, here we go. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming. Super excited to be here to talk about Porto. Some people have talked about it earlier today. This is going to go into more about the motivations, how we built it, why we built it, and what you can do with it today. But first, I wanted to give some context into my background. I've been working on developer tools for the past few years, primarily WAGMI, VM, and other developer tools that fall under our WebM umbrella. More recently, I've been working with Ithaca on Porto, which is the library that some people have talked about today, and we'll talk about more here. Before developer tools, I worked on various apps. The only reason I bring this up is just because that apps sort of inspired me to work on developer tools, and you can learn a lot from users and how you build your developer tools by making sure that you're solving problems for developers, if that's your audience, or users. And also, lastly, I'm very opinionated about what I work on, and sometimes those opinions don't always match with what other people have. And so, if you disagree with something in this talk, we'd love to chat with you after, and we can keep the discussion going. So how do you go about building a developer tool? First of all, it must solve a problem that you have. Usually, as a developer, you're solving your own problem. You've worked with some tools, and maybe if you're a day job or something, and you've been frustrated, it's taken a lot of time to do something. And so that is when you kind of know that, OK, I'm having an issue, maybe there's something there. An example of this is I was working building crypto apps, and I wasn't having a great experience. I was spending more time debugging wallet connections and how to send transactions than I was actually building my apps. And so that was kind of where the spark of WAGMI came from. I didn't know if I was going to be able to build anything better, but I had a hunch that I should try to look into it and figure out why the tools that existed weren't working very well. In crypto apps, often we maybe overcomplicate what we're solving. And so an example of this is if you're someone, in this case, you're eating and you need to clean your face after you eat, there's maybe a few different ways you can solve that problem. And if this was a crypto engineer solving it, you'd build this really complex mechanism just to have something to do it, when in reality, maybe there's a really simple solution, which is just a napkin. And so sometimes tools can seem really complex, but if you spend a lot of time experimenting, you can get to a place that where things kind of make more sense. And so the next step is, once you have a problem that you want to solve, is you have to build a bunch of different experiments. Usually you don't want to build the whole thing right away, because you spend all this time without validating that you're actually able to make something better. And then after you experiment, you hone those experiments. Maybe you try out the newest tech and libraries, make sure stuff is compatible and works well. And then if it's good enough and it meets your quality bar, then you can release it. And this is what we've done with WAGMI and a bunch of other tools that we use. And so what problem are we trying to solve here in this case? What problem is Porto trying to solve? So the UX of crypto has improved a lot over the last few years. It might be imperceivable to many of you that have been in the space for a while, but like it undoubtedly has. Like before, if you listened to Georgios' talk earlier, there was like a lot of stuff that you had to do, and each step, like you would have to have crazy activation energy to get over the bar. And nowadays, like things work. They don't usually break, but there's like so many options out there. So even like the best products that lots of people use, like ENS, if you want to go to ENS and use it for the first time or coming back to use it, you're presented with a bunch of different options for how to get started. And maybe this is good because you use one of these options and you can quickly find it and identify it, but for new users or other people, it's just like a lot of choice, and you have to make decisions, maybe install some extensions and stuff to get started. So we can improve this a little bit more. Some sites like Uniswap, which is really popular, have decided to kind of trim down the options quite a bit. There's like the case here where they're trimming down the options so they can show their options that they control and want to push you towards, which maybe is a little bit of a negative. But the nice thing is you don't really need to look through a bunch of options. These are the ones. And from a developer perspective, it is kind of great to make sure that like you're controlling the experience. If users that use your app, if there's like everyone's using a different wallet and has like a different experience, you're not able to make sure that the quality bar is super high. So my like spicy take would be that I think in the future we should we should support less options. That the downside of that is you can't use the long tail wallets, but those don't always work with different sites. So if all your users have the same nice experience, it's predictable, how they're using it, you can build really solid experiences end to end. And so my pitch would be that you would use Porto, but if you don't use Porto, you should just use like one other thing. And so what you also kind of see in this period is like people will switch to having the Web3 options, which are recognizable, but then also, because maybe those are annoying for users to download and set up, you see like the familiar options for someone that's coming without knowledge of how to use crypto. And so you see like OAuth options, email, stuff like that, which is great for maybe initial onboarding quickly, but then the problem you run into is these options aren't funded. They're coming with like a zero wallet balance, and then you need to figure out how to onboard crypto for those users too. And so Porto is our attempt to solve a bunch of these issues. Before today, how many people had heard of Porto? Okay, cool. And then also used Porto. Okay, yeah, maybe a little bit less. So Porto is a tool we released recently that aims to solve some of these problems. It has like the one jargony crypto description is an end-to-end account stack from contracts to JavaScript. And what that really means is it's auth plus payments. These are things that most apps need. They need to have their users log in, identify themselves, maybe not like, KYC, know who they are, but like have like a user ID somewhere in the database. And then payments, being able to like pay for services, transfer value, stuff like that. You can enable Porto really easily in your WAGMI apps just by installing the Porto package on NPM, importing the library, using the namespace to call Porto create. That's like the table stakes, really basic way to get set up. And we'll talk about other ways you can hook into cool Porto features like sponsoring and stuff like that later. The rest of this talk is going to kind of be a little bit more about the user-facing bits, how Porto works together. And there also are like a ton of great team members here that are wearing like the green badges that you should talk to learn more about like the lower level stuff, like the RPC server, contracts, how everything works together. I'm going to try to do it justice, but like the rest of the team is incredible, so you should try to find and talk to those people as well. So yeah, what is auth and payments? It's kind of like a final boss each one. Like auth, extremely hard. There's billion-dollar companies that work on auth. Payments, extremely hard. There's billion-dollar companies that work on payments. Porto is trying to tackle both them, but it's not trying to tackle the long tail of all the auth and payments problems. It won't do, at least right now and probably for a while, it won't do things like SAML, Active Directory. It won't allow you to do merchant refunds, tracking inventory at this moment. It just really handles, we give you an authenticated user, and you manage that user in your database. We give you a key for, you can use for subscriptions, but you have to then, have a serverless function or like a, some cron process that charges that key. And so for auth, Porto handles the glue of like auth and authorization. For payments, Porto handles like the on-ramping piece, maybe some sourcing liquidity for payments across chains in the future, and then most importantly, like executing your calls that you've signed with your Porto wallet. No API key is required. You can just get started with V0 or on your own, just install the package. And since Porto is just JavaScript functions, you can kind of, similar if you've used VM or Wagon before, everything's super composable. You can kind of configure stuff to work how you want it to. Yeah, so why even spend our time doing this? We built a lot of developer tools. Why would we want to go in and build something else that spends a lot of time and is probably even harder than building Foundry or Ref or Wagmi or VM in and of itself? And the first thing is like we have this problem ourselves, like wanting to use apps. Being app builders, we've built a lot of stuff in the past. We work with a lot of app builders and we see the problems they're going through. And probably the first thing is like new technology enables a lot of stuff. Like we're really interested in passkeys. We think they're a big improvement for crypto and non-crypto use cases. We can debate whether or not passkeys are good or not. I'm sure some people are skeptical and don't think they're going to be useful. A lot of those constraints are just like the tech is good, but like browsers don't have solid support across all of them, and there's some UI, UX issues with that as well. And passkeys use two things that you always have with you. One of them is your phone. The other is your face or like your fingerprint and stuff. So you don't have to worry about like figuring out like your password or where you put it or how to get into an account and stuff like that. Especially for like mainstream users. Like everyone's pretty comfortable at this point with like Apple Pay, scanning their face, signing into an app with Face ID, things like that. So we needed this SDK for some app ideas we wanted to build. And maybe we wouldn't have decided to build this if this was our first developer tools experience, but we feel pretty confident that like we're able to build stuff that we would use, and maybe we can experiment a bunch and generalize, and other people like using it too. And Porto, we've been working on it for 8 or 9 months, and like most of our tools, we love to iterate on them in public on GitHub. And so if things aren't exactly where we want them to be or where users want them to be, we keep working on them and make them better until they're so good that everyone wants to use them. And so yeah, Porto's kind of been this exercise in like speedrunning the account abstraction stack over like the past 9 months. We've kind of discarded like the years, maybe learned from it, but discarded like the actual tech stack that has existed for like and people have been working on for the past few years, and wanted to build stuff from like first principles and scratch. So what did the last 9 months look like? Yeah, if you were talking about like maybe this hypothesis that we're going to speed run the stack, like how do we actually do that? And it comes down to like the whole like process of how you build developer tools. And the most important thing is experimenting. Like we have a hunch that we think what we're going to build is going to be compelling and like work well, but like we don't actually know until we start experimenting. And because the scope of it is so big, like you have to conduct small experiments where you're able to like continually like test the hypothesis. Otherwise, like you spend like months, years building without any actual users, and then you don't know. So in October, we did an experiment that's called account delegation. And this was an experiment with passkeys. Can you create a passkey? Or I guess first you generate a private key in the browser, and then you create a passkey. You'd sign an authorization, which would then you would submit and give the passkey access to that account to be able to control it. And then at the very end, you'd forget the private key. The private key would be forgotten in the browser, no one would have access to it. And so now that passkey controls the account, and you can have some really nice experiences where instead of like having to download a separate wallet, browser extension, and then have a bunch of prompts, you can just sign a transaction with your fingerprint or face. Building on that, in November, we decided to do an experiment with something more like session keys. So people get prompt fatigue for signing a bunch of transactions, and if certain transactions are more lightweight, you could think of this as maybe like a for micropayments or something on an app. It's kind of annoying to be constantly prompted with actions like that. So this was an experiment where we created a non-extractable P256 key in the browser again, and that would be authorized to then maybe spend a certain amount of funds or perform a more lightweight action for a user. In December, we took these two experiments together and packaged it up into an NPM package that anyone could use. It was a more basic package that kind of just dealt with Porto in the browser communicating with some contracts on its own. And then in February, we used that package to create a more robust product-like experience for subscriptions. So you could imagine subscribing to an app or subscribing to a newsletter and paying them $10 a month. And so what would happen here is you'd create a key as an app developer on your server. That would get signed over, and you would grant permissions to it through Porto. And then once that is granted the permissions, you can then use it and charge it on a regular basis, maybe $10 a month or $100 a year to deduct your funds. And in May, we continued to bundle this all up together, and we added a really cool RPC server on the back end, which handles a bunch of estimation, call execution. It makes stuff really fast, and so that was in May. And so ultimately, we built something that looks like this. You have Porto, which is the JavaScript SDK. It's an iframe, or there's another form factor, which is just a pop-up window, if you want to do that, which shows up in your app. So the user doesn't have to install anything. They can easily connect, sign, grant permissions. And the other cool thing is the passkeys are global, so they use the Porto relying party ID. So if you create an account using Porto on a certain app and then go to another app that supports Porto, your account is the same for all of them, which is kind of cool. Most developers are interacting with the Porto SDK. It's an NPM package they can install and use it in their app. Behind the scenes, which basically powers a lot of what Porto does, is this RPC server, which does things like call execution. Porto sends it its calls. It figures out how to execute them as fast as possible and get them included as soon as possible. And then also does some really cool stuff, or at least in the future where you can pay fees in any coin. It calls out to the Porto backend for sponsorship and things like that. And then we have some really powerful contracts behind the scenes too, which communicate back and forth. If you didn't want to use the RPC, you could also use the contract mode in the Porto SDK, and that communicates directly. But the RPC is great because it speeds everything up and enables a bunch of features that you wouldn't have automatically in the contracts. So yeah, let's break down what a user sees, what happens from their perspective. So you can imagine this is a fictional, I guess Substack or Medium blogging app where you need to subscribe to read articles. There's a few different players here. There's the user, there's the application, and then there's Porto, which is I'm grouping together the SDK, the server, the contracts, everything in one for simplicity. And then the developer of the application also has a little API server that they have running to handle some stuff. So the user navigates to a blog post. Maybe they've seen it on Twitter or something like that. They want to read this article, but they find out that it's paywalled. But it looks really cool, so they're willing to do it. So what happens is they click a button that the developer has wired up in the app, which then opens the Porto dialog iframe. And you can show a few different things here. This app developer decides that they want to batch a bunch of stuff together. So they want the user to be able to either create an account or log in with their existing account that they've logged in on this site before or another site. And they also want them to be able to pay for the subscription in the single prompt too. And so if they don't have funds, they'll need to on-ramp as well. And so behind the scenes, in this request to create the subscription and log in, the developer sends a key that they've generated to the browser, which Porto will sign and then give it access to bill for the subscription. And so the user just hits confirm in the Porto dialog, or log in or sign up. If they don't have an account balance, they'll go through an on-ramping flow with Apple Pay. Let's assume that they do. Porto grants the permissions to the server key. Behind the scenes, once the application server receives the granted permissions, it can then bill the key $10 and then refresh the UI, and then the user can read the blog post. And so there's a lot of stuff that's happening below the application behind the scenes, but what the user sees is really just 3 clicks. They navigate to the site, they click subscribe, they see a prompt, they click login and subscribe. Maybe they go through an on-ramping flow, and then they can read the article. It's pretty fast, and a little bit easier experience than if you had to show up to the site and download a browser extension, maybe on-ramp or send funds from a different app, and then figure out, get another prompt, which was for, the permission to bill you. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. And this is, the point of the talk where, I've been building this for, 8 or 9 months, and, I think it's really cool, and it involves, tons of extra code that I'm going to try to, convince you that, you really should add it because it'll make your app better. And this is what happens in crypto all the time. You're too close to the problem, you haven't validated it, and it kind of creates this cult of trying to buy into the technology and not really understanding that it helps the user. But in reality, it looks more like this to use Porto. If you're using WAGMI, it's super easy. It's literally 3 lines. You're going to install the npm package, so that's 1 line of code that ends up being in your package JSON or in your terminal. You're going to import the Porto WAGMI connector, and then you're going to add it to your connectors array. That's all you have to do to use Porto. And what that enables is your users won't have to go install a browser extension. They won't need to figure out how to transfer funds to this wallet. They can use a built-in on-ramp inside of Porto. And yeah, all they have to do is use this app, and they can use it on mobile, on desktop. All they need to do is have a passkey, can sign transactions with their face. And this also enables a lot for you as a developer, too. Do you want to sponsor transactions for your users? My argument is every app, especially if it's a money-making app, should sponsor their transactions, just as the cost of doing business for a good experience. So Porto has this merchant RPC request handler that you can add to your Next.js function or your Cloudflare worker, and you can configure it to a bunch of different things. But one of them is there's a sponsors function property that you can add, and it's a really simple concept. If you return true from that, it will sponsor the function. If you return false, it doesn't sponsor it. And you can do a bunch of async work in there. You can check the address against an allow list. You can maybe check the accounts balance. You could go into your database, grab database row, see how old this account is, and decide to sponsor it if it meets certain criteria. So it is really powerful. And the nice thing is, you just set up this function, and the RPC server will call it on the back end for you. So you don't have to run any extra infrastructure other than just this one serverless function. Another example of something that Porto does is connects in with sign-in with Ethereum or other auth solutions that you have. And so, if you're using WAGMI, you can just continue using the use connect hook like you would before. Or I guess like right now we have like a special one from Porto, but at some point that will be upstreamed into WAGMI. And you have like you have your API, which sets up all the auth routes that are required for sign-up with Ethereum, or other auth routes. Maybe you're using BetterAuth, which Porto works with as well. And then when you call connect in your application, you pass a sign-up with Ethereum capability with an auth URL, and then Porto will automatically call that during the login flow, and you'll get an authenticated user out of that. So you'll know that they're the one that controls the Porto wallet. Okay, so maybe you're building an app today at the hackathon, or when you go back after the conference, and there's some mechanisms that general patterns and mechanisms that you can use in Porto that are just like key things that you can follow. One of them is the passkey sign-up, really fast. If you're like building an app, and you have like the soup of existing options right now, you support like browser wallets, Rainbow, like Wallet Connect, all this stuff. I would recommend like trying it out and adding this, especially for new users, and seeing if they can sign up faster and using your app without having to do a lot of extra work. The other nice thing is once a lot of people start using Porto too, you'll be able to benefit from these global accounts. So users will be able to go from one app to another with balances and be able to go between them very easily. Another great use case is subscriptions. So it's the really simple idea of like you give Porto a server key that gets authorized, and then you can use it later to perform actions. That can be used for like, I guess like different billing models. The key can be used, if you want to do lightweight actions in your app. So there's a bunch of different options for that. Another is one-time payments. Like, historically in crypto, one-time payments have been really friction-full. Like you've had to like, have someone sign up, download a bunch of stuff, on-ramp, these things. We have like this idea of like a guest checkout coming, which allows you to defer creating an account, so you don't have to create the passkey yet, but allows you to Apple Pay, which then gets sent into like an account that's just in time, and then that gets charged. So there's a few different models that you can do. One of them is like a Substack Patreon style subscription thing. You can have lightweight actions involved with that too, with like micropayments for tipping. Another is like a Shopify style storefront with one-time payments and like a guest checkout. We're working really hard with our on-ramp partners to support like a KYC-less on-ramp, like up to $500, so it's like super smooth. $500 lifetime. And then another example of how powerful Porto is you can just build an entire wallet in Porto. So Porto will just be like the headless like functions that you can then use. And then you can build a wallet on your front end, which allows you can build in features like swapping and stuff, use like session keys to make it really easy for people to perform actions without having to like sign every time. So yeah, the recap is Porto is just basic auth and payments right now. Things that it can help out with are onboarding with global accounts, like on-ramping. And yeah, the other case is programmable payments. So if you like want to buy into the basic concept of having a key for everything and being able to charge your accounts and have stuff be really fast and frictionless for users, then you can check out Porto. And yeah, if you have any questions, happy to answer them. We have like we have a developer chat. You can go to the docs, and we're on GitHub as well.
You mentioned KYC. Is that something that you would handle inside the UI for Porto? And then also, are there any plans to do like the reverse of checkout, like withdraw to Apple Pay, bank, whatever?
Yeah. So as far as KYC relates, we're not handling any of that right now. Our whole goal is to have like a frictionless on-ramp experience with no KYC up to $500 lifetime. And then, after you hit that $500 lifetime, it's still being figured out what to do. But the ideal is like, first-time payments, user shows up to the app, they can onboard, buy something really easily once they surpass that, we're going to need to figure it out. Probably work with partners. We're not going to do that stuff on our own, likely. And then your other question? Oh, withdraw, yeah. So Porto has this idea of merchant accounts. You saw that with like the merchant RPC like request handler. And so yeah, we'll be building like a suite of tools for like, you know, your merchant account, which is also a Porto account. Like, what do you do with funds in that? You can sponsor directly from the merchant account. You know, maybe you can off ramp. Maybe you can like pay people, stuff like that.
Hello, Manny here.
Where are you?
Right in front of you.
Oh, okay.
So if I recall correctly, the whole benefit of Porto is that it's an entire infrastructure with the contracts, et cetera. Is there a goal to have other EVM chains supported, or is the goal for other chains to kind of deploy this themselves for that infra? And I do have a second question, and I think Georgios mentioned that there's a sense of modules potentially. Like, is that something that's coming? Maybe like an idea of like intent-based bridging to be faster on-ramping, et cetera. So yeah, those are two questions.
Yeah, chain support comes up a lot. As far as non-EVM chains go, maybe at some point, like really focused on doing a job on EVM stuff right now. And then in terms of breaking apart Porto into separate pieces, we think like it works really well together, end to end. I think there are some probably tools that we built or pieces of the stack that people would benefit from on their own, and we might break those up as needed. But yeah, I would love to hear more like what specifics, or if anyone has like specific pieces of Porto that they think can solve their problem, yeah, it'd be good to chat about more. So, thanks.
Right, so the one takeaway from this talk is use Porto, it's feature complete, has best-in-class onboarding. For intent-based interop, the last question, we have been building on it, and we have some limited preview access to it. We have demonstrated it working between OP and base mainnet, where you can get one-click instant going from one chain to another without having to figure out anything bridging related. So I think it's awesome. It's a full suite of tools. You should build something with it, with V0 or not. Now, the next speaker is the first engineer that I worked with in the capacity of the open source that we've been doing, Matthias Seitz. He's done some of the most insane work, I think, in the industry, starting with Ethers, which then became Alloy, with Foundry, then with Reth. And all of the work that we've been doing builds on foundation of high-performance infrastructure, and Reth ultimately is that foundation. So Matthias is going to talk to us about the future of Reth and how we see it as a platform for building high-performance infrastructure. Give it up for Matthias.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. This talk will be part recap, part follow-up of a talk that we gave last year, and also part showcase what is currently already doable with using Reth as like a SDK-style platform for building Ethereum EVM-based applications. So what we have learned over the last few years is that a lot of users are asking for modifications and want to repurpose existing stacks for their special applications. These are either L1s, L2s, application-specific, for example, indexing the entire chain, or even researchers are asking for some modifications, like a special endpoint that looks up certain contracts, things like that. But what they all have in common most of the time is that they want to build on top of the EVM, and they want to allow their users to access the chain, which usually happens directly over Ethereum RPC, and who has worked on RPC on the back end knows that it's not a fun thing to do. So ideally, all of this just works, and you can focus on your core modifications, like adding additional logic or just fine-tuning stuff. But overall, everything should just work. There are I believe there are two different approaches right now. One is just forking the entire client implementation and treat it as your own repository that you then occasionally have to rebase, which is quite painful, and it also tends to lead to to the client falling behind of the upstream repository in terms of features. If there's a new endpoint or a new hard fork is coming up, it usually takes some time until it propagates to the entire ecosystem. The other approach is thinking about EVM as not the main focus of the chain, and instead adding EVM support later on top as some kind of module, which is not necessarily always the best implementation, because it's basically just bolt on and treated as an afterthought. I want to quickly recap what has happened since last year, where we gave a talk that was primarily like a wish list of features and modifications that we can offer, and primarily the transition from having Ethereum L1 and L2 or OP stack client to more like a SDK style code base that you can build various things with. So initially we had just L1 support. Then thankfully Klebby and Andreas from the OP Labs team added OP stack support via feature flags, and we learned quite a lot about OP stack because all the OP stack specific modifications were then marked with feature flags. But this allowed us to also launch what we called AlphaNet during last year's Frontiers, which was a OP stack chain that had the 7702 transaction type. It had all the new BLS precompiles. And we had it up and running on Conduit for last year's conference. And this was, I believe, 9 months before the hard fork. Later that year, we also launched this as the Odyssey OP stack chain, which is still up and running on Conduit. But now 7702 is widely adopted by most of the chains, which is nice. But the entire project only was a few, I want to say 2,000 lines of code just to get the modifications into the OP stack. And this got us thinking that ideally we can also cut this down and make this even more flexible. The way it looked previously was that we had all of these feature flags across the code base, which made it initially very easy to add OP-specific modifications into the code base, but eventually it was just a horrible experience for us developers and for users as well, and eventually slowed us down. So we took a step back and rethought how the client should look like, and eventually ripped out all of the core abstractions and then put everything into smaller modules that are then grouped by chain, like Ethereum and Optimism, that are built on top of shared primitives, because the OP stack and L1 are quite similar, but they have significant differences where it matters in the EVM and on the primitives type, for example. This transition was quite painful for us as well and for users. I think we stabilized as of recently, and all the newer migrations to newer releases I did with Claude Code when we had to update separate repositories. So I believe it's easier now. We have also gotten a lot of user feedback, and I'm very proud that a lot of top teams are now using some of our code bases. And the vision for Ref as an SDK really is that we want to have a fully type configurable node that lets you define how transactions look like, how the block looks like, lets you modify certain EVM behavior, and then on top lets you modify certain behavior where users interact with the chain, that is RPC or block building, things like that. And why I think the SDK strategy wins here is that this entirely removes the rebasing effort. So you will get up to date with the latest L1 features just by updating your dependencies. All of our code bases are battle tested against mainnet, constantly looked at, and we are pretty fast with fixing bugs, so those should get upstreamed just by updating your dependencies. And in general, it will just speed things up. So what does it currently look like building with Ref as an SDK for your chain, and what can you do right now? First, we have an entire ecosystem of fully open source code that is MIT or Apache dual licensed. First off, we have the core primitives, which are just your address type, your signed integers and stuff. One level below that, we have then the actual Ethereum and Optimism specific types, which are transactions, EIP specific types and implementations, both for L1 and for the OP stack. There now exist a few others that are also adapting this. And then one level below, we have the EVM abstractions that we recently introduced, and I will talk about in a bit, where you can now fully configure how the EVM works. You can override behavior for precompiles, even opcodes, all of it basically, and then some additional tooling for all things RPC or transaction tracing, which is pretty commonly used for all the MEV bots or anything that needs to quickly trace a transaction when it enters the pool. And on the lowest level is then finally Ref. And the goal for us for next year will be just to push things up the stack. So we try to stabilize certain features in Ref before we then eventually make this part of a more common, more usable interface and just push it up the stack. What Ref under the hood looks like is something like this, where you have all of your primitives at the lowest level. These are your transaction type, your block. On top would be the EVM. And on top of that would be all your standalone components that are built on top of, that make use of all those primitives and can also be used standalone, like the transaction pool, for example, or block building, sequencing, however you want to call it. And all of those can be modified and then plugged together to one node. On the top level, we have RPC, which has compatibility with all of those components below. So ideally, you don't have to modify certain logic, for example, for ETH estimate gas or anything like that if you defined your EVM and your transaction types properly. So what the core abstraction looks like is this, where this basically just defines what a block looks like. We have the block that is composed of a header and a body, and the block body is made up of transactions and some additional metadata, or can just be transactions. For L1, it would be the additional withdrawals, and pre-merge, you have also the uncle headers. And this should be flexible enough to define your entire blockchain that is composed of blocks, of course. And what this looks like for Ethereum and for Optimism is something like this, where you already see that the OP stack is then different from L1 besides the block header type. For OP stack, you have an additional transaction type, which then also changes the block type, of course. Because this is a trade-based approach, defining new transaction type can be quite some work, because you need things like RLP encoding, SerDes, serialization, all of that. And what if the use case is just extend the L1 transaction set or the OP stack transaction set with an additional transaction type, or you want to introduce your custom transaction set? Then you can use our newer transaction envelope macro, which will take care of all of your trades requirements that will then just be derived for your transaction type. Also generates an enum that defines all of the variants that are supported. And this just removes a ton of code. We already included it for our Ethereum and Optimism variants. And one recent project that we did was the Alloy EVM project, which the motivation for that is we got a lot of requests for how can I use OP stack state transition function as a standalone component, or the L1 state transition function. I want to execute an entire block, and main use case we are seeing for this right now are like CK proving, executing just blocks without necessarily needing the entire node. So we built a layer on top of the EVM itself, which takes care of block execution in general. Block execution, we think is made up of three parts. One is executing system calls or anything before the transactions. Then we execute the transactions, and after that we have what is called post-transaction, which would then, for example, apply all of the balance changes, the withdrawals, fees, and such. And all of this now lives in a separate repository that you can just import and use as a standalone component. And it allows you to modify existing EVM implementation, for example, simply replacing, adding new precompiles. And we have implementations for this for L1 and for the OP stack. And there are a few more out there already. That I want to shout out now. We have, for example, Kona, which announced this week. The Kona team is also here today, I believe, which is using, as I mentioned, the Alloy EVM component as a standalone executor, where you don't need the execution layer node, and instead you just execute the block because you need the state transition function for stateless execution in Kona's use case. Another thing that started happening after we shipped our core abstraction is that we finally had support for customizing header types, which is apparently pretty common in alt L1s or tools. One example for this would be Revgnosis, which is already operational. This is not a Rev fork. It is based on top of ref components, specified GNOSIF types, and EVM modifications. One more thing that is still work in progress, but pretty close, is ref BSC. This has been attempted before, but as a ref fork, which was too painful to maintain. And now it has been rewritten by a contributor on top of ref as an SDK stack. And there are still a few quirks here and there, but it includes the entire BSC EVM implementation, BSC block types, and all of the differences when it comes to where are blocks coming from. Whereas on L1, the blocks are coming from the consensus layer. On Binance, on BSC chain, they are still coming over P2P. And our current model is flexible enough to also support that. And last but not least, we have Ref Bera, which is a similar approach to the Gnosis project, which has different EVM implementation, different transaction type, different header. And this is also built on top of Ref as a platform and not as a fork. And I do expect that there will be more projects like this, but we also have more requests coming in, which primarily focus on using custom consensus implementations that are not necessarily the engine API interface, but something more native, which we are working towards. And ideally, we can cut down more lines of code and make it even easier to get started with. And more modularity for things like try modifications or database modifications in general. Things that we want to see built there are a few chains missing. Ref Arbitrum would be nice, as well as Ref Polygon, and maybe more. If you have ideas, questions, or feature requests, please reach out to us. We do support. We are pretty active on the Telegram group chat as well. So if you have any technical questions or feature requests, please let me know. And happy to take questions. Thank you.
What's REST's plan for balancing software complexity versus flexibility in terms of like supporting other blockchains? So taking as example, we need to hook many places, not just like create a standalone modules to build our own layer ones. We were suspect that like bringing all these changes to REST would actually make REST like less flexible for other architectures. So I think it's a common question for all these kind of like softwares. Like, how do you balance this abstraction versus like customization?
That's a good question, and the line is not always easy to draw. I think the approach we are taking right now is that we are fine with taking on more additional complexity for like internal components if it makes the user interface easier and more flexible. And if we think that something might be too complex, we are starting to work on primarily ergonomic improvements. For example, as I showed, deriving certain prerequisites for dealing with transaction types or other things.
One more? All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so the vision for Reth is to be basically the central piece of infrastructure that basically powers the crypto economy built on the EVM. Yes, we need to make some trade-offs on how we approach the complexity and the features of the node, but as Matt said, we're fine with like making the internals. Yeah, they're not the most beautiful, but what ends up happening is that you expose something that's really flexible to devs. And as more people come to us, then we're figuring out things. And I think what we've found is that the areas where most people want customizations are new transaction types, which cascade all the way down to the block building logic, whether it is WorldCoin having to prioritize transactions that came from humans, or if you're building something that's optimized for payments, and so on. Now, the final talk of the day, and it's been a good, intense morning, is going to come from Tobias from Anthropic, who's going to talk to us about Claude Code and then take us into lunch and hackathon. Give it up for Tobias.
All right, thank you. Excited to be here. We are almost there. I'm the last thing standing between you guys and lunch and this hackathon. So let's get to it. So I'm Tobias. I'm on the Applied AI team at Anthropic. And first, two important questions here. One is, who has already redeemed their Anthropic credits that we sent out ahead of time? Show of hands. Proactive folks. We have a few proactive folks. All right. For the rest of you guys, good news, at the end of this, we're going to have a QR code. You can scan it. You can still get $100 in Anthropic credits to help out during your hackathon. So what we're going to talk about here, just a quick one-up show, we're going to talk about how did we get to these AI coding agents. And then number two, Claude Code, what makes it so powerful, how it works. And then we'll talk about some practical use cases of how you guys can use Claude Code, some tips and tricks, and some more advanced features. So let's zoom back in time a little bit. If you would have asked me maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, hey, Tobias, how should I be using AI? I probably would have said a single LLM call, right? You put some text in, and then it spits some text out. This is maybe summarization or classification. And at the time, that felt like magic. So that was great. Then we started to get more creative, more complex, and we chained these LLM calls together. This might be in parallel or in series, and we call this a workflow because it's still a predefined set of LLM calls. And you can do a lot of cool stuff with this. This was AI chatbots. A lot of these are predefined workflows with LLM calls. And now where we're at today are these agentic workflows. And this is a buzzword. A lot of people throw around agents and miscategorize agents. What an agent really is it is deciding its own trajectory, right? So it's got an orchestrator model, and then you give a set of tools, and you give it a goal, and then it iterates until it hits that goal. And as far as where we're going, we're not going to dive too deep into this, but looking at longer horizon, more complex agentic tasks. So that brings us to Claude Code. So Claude Code is our agentic command line tool. And we found that you can delegate it substantial coding tasks, and it can go off and execute on its own. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what makes Claude Code so powerful? The obvious one is the brain, the model. And so this is typically either Sonnet or Opus. And it's really good at complex tasks and tool calling. So out of the box, it comes with 14 tools in your command line, so it can read files, edit files, write files. You can hook it up to your other command line tools as well. It can search the web. And it's got granular permissioning as well. So what this means is like you're always trying to figure out how to keep the human in the loop in these agentic workflows. On one side of it, you're hitting approve every 10 seconds. And then on the other side, you delegate an hour, and it goes off and does something you didn't intend. So we've actually built in granular permissions. You can say, Claude, you're allowed to read files, but if you want to go edit stuff in my S3 bucket, you need permission. It's really good at agentic search as well. You kind of give it these broad, challenging tasks, and it will go crawl through your code base and find those files, find the classes, find the functions. And of course, security is always top of mind. This all runs locally on your computer. The calls go direct to Anthropic API, or it's also running on AWS Bedrock or Vertex. This is in contrast. A lot of tools, they'll index your code, and then those embeddings will be uploaded to the cloud. So you're probably saying, Tobias, this is great, but do I really want to code in the terminal? Can't I just wrap this in a nice GUI, or how do I use this with my IDE? The good news is this is meant to be a complement to your current IDE. So this integrates with, we've got integrations with VS Code and all the VS Code forks. So if you're using Cursor, if you're using Windsurf, or JetBrains, all you need to do is you just run Claude Code. So once you install it, and we'll cover that later, you just run Claude in the terminal inside your IDE, and it will install that integration. Super simple. What does this get you? So one really neat feature, it gets you this diff viewing. So Claude goes away, it makes some edits, and it proposes it to you. You can view those diffs right in your IDE. And it's also contextually aware. You can select a chunk of text and then say, hey, Claude, what's going on in these lines? Or change this variable that I've highlighted right here. All right, so let's talk about how to use it. There's 3 use cases we're going to cover. First is around learning about an existing code base. See if we can get the demo to pull up here. So this is an open source repo. It's Excalidraw. This is an online collaboration tool. Some of you guys might be familiar with it. And traditional flow, you might poke around in the code base. You might go to somebody that's knowledgeable and ask them questions. So here, we're actually just going to ask Claude, without any prior context, just go through this code base and explain what's going on in the relationships. So here, you can see it. It's agentically searching through. It's reading in these files. And then in just a couple seconds, it's going to spit out a summary of the project, the different modules within the project, and some of the different architectures that are used. So this is actually, at Anthropic, this is actually how we onboard engineers. We just give them Claude Code, and we say, go explore the code base. Go ask questions about our mono repo. All right, so let's talk about some tactical tricks. So step 1, you're hopping into a new code base. Just ask it to explain stuff for you. You can reference specific files with the @ key, with the @ character there. You can have it document this architecture. So if you write /init, it's going to go through, read all your code base, and then document that structure. The ClaudeMD file, a lot of you guys might be familiar. This is where it's got like a system instructions where you can give it preferences on, number 1, tools that you have available in the CLI or MCPs, or if you have styling preferences, like every time I make a change, make sure to run the linter, the type checker, and run any test cases. It's surprisingly good at just agentic web search. So you can just ask it, go off and find me a good open source repo for browser use. And it'll go off, compile that back, and you can kind of feed that into your development plan. And this is another fun one we were playing around with just last week. Have it visualize your code architecture. So for the Excalidraw one, we just asked it, hey, Claude, help me visualize what's going on in this architecture. And I said, hey, just do it in one HTML file. And just in a few seconds, it whipped up a pretty decent outline that might help some people understand what's going on in your code. All right, so now how do we actually build stuff with Claude Code? There's a lot of different apps that can build something from scratch, right? You're vibe coding on half a dozen different tools, 0 to 1, one-shotting different apps. What Claude is particularly good at is taking an existing application and building new features on top of that. That's a much more complex task. We can do the 0 to 1 as well. So can about a dozen other folks. So an example here, I've got a chatbot. It's a customer support chatbot. And I want to implement a chat history feature. And so I'm just going to tell Claude, I want to implement the ability to save chats. I want it to appear in that left-hand column. And I'm also going to need a new chat button up at the top. You can see it work. You can see it making the changes. It summarizes what it actually changed for you. And just like that, in one shot, it has chat history exactly where we want it on the left, and new chat button up on the top. So this is just one example. Some tips and tricks when you guys are building this afternoon. You guys have probably heard this, but I can't emphasize it enough. You need to spend time planning, right? So there's a few things you can do here. One, just ask Claude to make a plan. So if you use the keyword plan, it's going to lay out the proposed steps, but it's not going to actually write any code yet. You got to do this first. The second option is you hit Shift-Tab, and then it'll go into plan mode. This does something similar, where it creates a plan, but it doesn't write any code yet. You can also use these keywords, think hard, and ultra think. This actually allocates additional tokens to allow Claude to spend more time making a plan. So if you're laying out a really complex task, use some of these key thinking words. Connect it to some of your other tools. So you guys may be familiar with MCPs. One of the most powerful workflows I've seen, hook it up to your Jira, and then you can say, hey, Claude, pull in the 5 latest Jira bugs and make a plan to address them. And it'll automatically pull that in and make a plan for you to review. Find a way to let Claude iterate. This is a really fun one. So if you're making maybe a web app, a mobile app, give it some way to actually visualize that end product. So you can either just take screenshots and then drag that into the terminal, and you can say, hey, Claude, this part looks wrong, or make it look like this. Or you can hook up the Playwright MCP. Then Claude can actually open your browser, take a screenshot, and iterate until it looks like what you want. So I've seen a lot of really powerful workflows with that. You can have it write tests and then say, hey, Claude, iterate against this test until it passes. And there's a whole bunch of automation you can do with GitHub as well. Hook it up to the GitHub CLI, and you can have it automate a lot of your Git commands. You can have it write your commit comments for you. All right, so now you've built a couple features. You want to know, in my hackathon this afternoon, you guys are hacking for 7-8 hours, how do I do as much as possible? How do I build 10 times faster? Here's a couple ways. The first thing you're going to want to think about, how can I parallelize my Claude workflows? There's a couple ways to do this. I was just talking with Matthias before this. He's using Claude directly in the terminal. The first simplest option, this is what I do, you just open another terminal with Claude. So you set your first Claude off in one terminal. Maybe you're planning a feature and executing. Just open up another terminal, run it in parallel. You can go off and start researching a new feature. Maybe you go debug a different feature. I'm maxed out at about two terminals here, 2 Claudes. I've seen people just run 4 terminals. So not that it's a challenge. Git work trees. This is another great feature that's integrated with GitHub. You can check out multiple versions of the same repo and then have Claudes working on independent features so they don't run into each other. And let's talk sub-agents for a minute. So this was a recently released feature. There's 2 things to note here. You can ask Claude to run agents in parallel. So you can say, I want to build these 3 features, spin up 3 agents to execute this in parallel. So that's step 1. Step 2, you can create specialized sub-agents. So you just type /agents. And what this does, these sub-agents, number 1, they preserve the context of your main agent. So you can have a sub-agent go off and explore a massive code base, learn what the structure and architecture looks like, come back, and it'll output a summary to your orchestrator agent. But all of that additional context is then preserved. That doesn't muddy up the primary orchestrator agent. So this is super useful. You can also have specialized instructions for these sub-agents. So I spun up just a code researcher sub-agent for this exact use case, and you can give it some special system instructions. You can even assign it a different model as well. So play around. There's a lot of really powerful workflows you can do with these sub-agents. All right, we are almost there. One more advanced feature. So everything we're talking about here has been Claude Code in the terminal. You can also invoke Claude Code through our SDK. So this is, for example, in GitHub. You can actually go into GitHub, and it's called GitHub Actions, and you can tag Claude. You can say, @Claude, please investigate and propose a plan for this issue, and that actually spins up a version of Claude to go investigate. So you could actually build a call to essentially the Claude agent within your application. All right. So with that, super excited to see what you guys are going to build. One of the best parts of Claude Code, there is so much user-generated content about some of the really advanced workflows that we're seeing. So we love to see what you guys come up with. Scan the QR code here. There's going to be a cutoff in 15 minutes. So you guys have 15 minutes to sign up for your Anthropic credits. Installation instructions right here. Super simple. Try it out. And we'll pause there. Thank you. Let's do, I don't know how we're doing on time. I know we're already late. Maybe one question before lunch? Two. What do we got?
Hi, thanks for sharing and thanks for the QR code. My question is very general. It's like, how do you think AI coding agent will help developers improve their own skills, including working with AI together?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of how do you not fall behind in your own coding development skills by just delegating everything to the agent and then it cranks off? We've actually I saw an experimental project that actually, it's a /learning mode that somebody developed where as Claude is cranking along, it's actually explaining why it's doing certain actions. So I think there's some really creative ways that once we get to the capability of you could delegate 2 hours of coding directly to the agentic tool, that you can then intentionally ask it, bring me along for the ride. So I think we need to be intentional about it, but there's a ton of opportunity there for it to actually be the primary teaching mechanism to keep us sharp. One more. Anybody? No one. You guys are just excited to go start hacking away.
Thank you. It's a bit of a kind of tactical question. How would you describe the difference between using Claude Code versus using Sonnet in Cursor? What are the differences? Do you get different outputs from the models?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like, when should you use Claude Code versus an IDE that also has an AI-powered tool? In general, the workflow that I've seen most common, again, a lot of folks will use Claude Code in Cursor. That's a pretty common workflow. Mostly, I see Claude Code being used early in the development process for really complex agentic tasks. Like if you're looking to delegate something for 30, 40 minutes and build out the architecture, you kind of start architecting and planning with Claude Code. And then as you get later in the process, you're doing some surgical edits, you're probably going to do that in your IDE. So maybe that's Cursor with some autocomplete powered by Sonnet. So they work together. Each person has their own preference, but that is the most common better together that I've seen. It's a good question, though. We had one more up front here.
I was just wondering what time you are leaving the event.
Yeah. You're trying to get some bonus credits, I see here. I'll be hanging out for probably another 30 minutes. So if you've got extra questions, come find me at lunch. Love to chat, hear about what you guys are doing with Claude Code. All right. Thank you.
Nice. Okay, we made it. Good job, everybody. One thing about Claude Code is like like that and other tools we've been using in the maintenance of our open source projects. The Git work trees idea is like really good. Dan from our team, what he does is that he has a CloudMD at the top level of his projects directory, and he just runs Claude there. And basically what that means is that you can do cross-repository stuff, and you give the top-level agent access to all of your code bases. So because we're building Reth, but Reth imports Alloy, I need the agent to like have knowledge of what's going on in Alloy. So we just tell it, hey, this is my project there. It looks like the GitHub work tree. So project Paradigm Reth, OK, that's Reth. Project Alloy, that's Alloy. And that's how you can tell the agent to find things. The other thing is that all of these agents, they're really powerful, but if you need them to, if you need to approve their action on every step, then you're going to be going too slow. And you can do it on a case-by-case basis. Oh, don't ask me about this again. I think that's wrong, and I think you should go max reckless, where what we do is that Claude, the CLI, it has an option called dangerously skip permissions. So you want to be running with that. But if you run it with dangerously skip permissions, maybe it goes and deletes your root directory, or it goes and does crazy things. So it's always good to run this within a Docker container. So what you do is that you run Docker, you run Claude from a Docker image, and you have Docker have read-only access to the whole work tree, and you give it write access only to specific things. And then you let it go crazy, and you're not worried that it's going to eat you in unlucky ways. The other thing I want to highlight is that the creator of Flask, the very popular Python library, Armin Ronasher, he built a tool with some others called Vibe Tunnel, which I really like, which basically it lets you run your agent in your desktop, but you can get an SSH tunnel that you can open on your phone, and you can connect to via Tailscale, for example. And that's really cool because if you're on the bus or something, you can vibe code on the move, which I don't know, you might want to do that. All right, so the morning sessions are done. Hackathon starts. What's going to happen? So you can start coding from now, or if you've been already in the other room, fantastic, until 3 p.m. tomorrow. The venue, we have access today until 8 p.m. 8 p.m., doors are closed, we're all out. So if you want to code after that, fantastic. Do it at your hotel or at some bar, or whatever you want. But that's it. The merch closes at 2 p.m. So right now, it's 12:30. You have 90 minutes to get your merch, or you get them tomorrow. Lunch boxes are served outside. Go get them. We have a cafe. We have more coffee open from 2 to 8 p.m. And yeah, tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp, come. We have infra talks tomorrow, so we're going to go a bit deeper on what's happening. I think all, if not most, are Rust talks, so it's going to go really hard. And then we're going to also do a small closing reception starting at 4 p.m. Now, for the hackathon, 3 p.m. we wrap. 3 to 4 p.m. we're going to have 2 to 3 minutes per team to come and present. Present within 2-3 minutes, no more, no less. The people that we, based on vibes, think did the best work will get a keyboard. The keyboards are really special, they're really expensive. Use them, put them in a glass box for showcase. Do whatever you want. But we're going to distribute them based on how we feel about the quality of the participation. So there won't be a formal judging process. So it's going to be basically what me and my friends think about your work. And yeah, 3 to 4 p.m., that's what's happening. 4 p.m., we're closed, and we go outside for just some chilling and talking and enjoying the end of the day. Thank you all. Let's enjoy the rest of the day.